Welcome to Raging Bullets, Pop Culture and Whatnot, episode 372. Welcome to Raging Bullets. I'm Sean and Dr. Norge, and I'm joined as always by my co-host Jim. What kind of an episode are we doing again? So says the sensei of the Whatnot, Segulin and the Duke of You Know. We actually record our segments before we record the intro and the outro, and out of force of habit, I started doing the first one, calling it a DC Comics fan podcast, which we are. But periodically, we've started doing these pop culture and whatnot shows where we take a little sidestep outside of our normal topics just to geek out about pop culture in general. This one, we're going to focus on Doctor Who's 50th anniversary with the Day of the Doctor. So if you haven't seen that episode, you definitely want to make sure to watch it before joining in on this show. We also have listener voicemails. There's one in particular from our friend Jason from the podcast that goes Snick. And we're saving that one for next episode because two of the things that he asks about, one of them has a major spoiler, and it should really be a part of our next show because we're going to talk about the two books that he mentions in his recording. So, Jason, we aren't ignoring your voicemail. It's actually going to be a pivotal part of our next episode. We are proud members of the Comics Podcast Network and the League of Comic Book Podcasts. Sponsoring this episode are DCBService.com and InStockTrades.com. Over at DCBService.com, we're actually at the very end of November, which means they're getting ready to swap out the old books and start putting in the books that are going to be up and on sale for December. Remember, they are a digital partner. If you have not linked your digital accounts, please make sure to do that because 5% of every purchase goes towards your DCB service order. It's a great way to save money. I'm finding every month that it's great to have that extra few bucks come off of my bill because I do a lot of digital shopping and it's very helpful and adds up very fast. Over at InStockTrades.com, they got a Black Friday sale going on right now. DC, Marvel, Image, Dark Horse are 46% off. IDW, Valiant, Fantastic Graphics, and Boom are 38% off. It's a great opportunity to start saving some money. Here's a great example. They got Daredevil by Frank Miller and Klaus Janson. This is their omnibus hardcover. It's a new printing of this at 46% off, only $53.99 for an omnibus. I mean, like, that's crazy.
Nice.
So, yeah, and right there, you've got free shipping. So, orders of $50 or more give you free shipping. It's getting close to the holiday season. I find that I'm giving out trades and hardcovers and things a lot more as gifts for my friends because we're all on a budget. A lot of the stuff that we always talk about on the show. It's a great way to give people some reading material that they might enjoy. And for some of my friends that are casual comic fans or, just read based on recommendation, it's a good chance for me to really think about them as a person and get them some material that they'd really enjoy that'll probably last them a couple of months because they tend to read more casually. And it gives me a chance to save some money on that. So it's really kind of a cool deal. And I want to thank DCB Service and InStockTrades.com for supporting our show. James, what kind of a podcast are we?
Pop Culture and Whatnot, a division of Raging Bullets, is a spoiler podcast. We will go in-depth into plotline, story twists, and whatnot associated with the 50th anniversary of the Doctor, as well as the Doctor Who universe. So, before listening to our show, please make sure you have watched the appropriate television broadcasts. This way, we can all enjoy the show.
That was pretty clever. I like that one. Let's talk some Doctor Who.
Spinning with great speed, the Flash creates a protective vacuum around himself.
Jim, as the special Pop Culture and Whatnot episode, this is really an indulgence to me, and I appreciate you going along with it because you're always so flexible that way. I wanted to do something Doctor Who on the show to the point where, do I want to do another podcast? Do I want to do something or other? This is where these Pop Culture and Whatnot episodes are fun because every so often we can take a step outside. We had the 50th anniversary episode, The Day of the Doctor. I adored it. I mean, for me as a fan, it was a fanboy geek out. Like, it had so many nods to the past of Doctor Who, but I loved, my wife watched it with me, and there wasn't a point in time where it seemed inaccessible to her. She's seen a decent amount of Doctor Who being married to me, and especially when we were in college, I was in a super heavy Doctor Who phase where I was watching telesnap reproductions of episodes that were lost because I wanted to see everything. So she sat through a lot of Doctor Who with me, but she's not a Doctor Who aficionado. So it didn't seem like she was lost. In your case, like, what is your background with Doctor Who, and how was this episode for you? Because that's me as the longtime Geek Out fan enjoying this. What was your experience?
Well, hold on. First, before we get into anything, I think in this last couple seconds of the show, we just determined why we call Mariah Saint Mariah on this show. Because while you guys were dating, she was sitting through the Doctor Who stuff, and not even just the regular Doctor Who episode, the Telesnap.
No, wait, no, let me clarify that too. She didn't watch I didn't put her through the Telesnap stuff, because that I wasn't going to do to her. What happened was I had a lot of Doctor Who on DVD, and we'd watch it together, and she enjoyed it. Now, did she see everything? No. That's why I said she's not really, an aficionado. But she went to conventions. Actually, I take it back. We should probably go back to what you're saying, because she went to conventions with me. There was this convention in Chicago called Visions that was really just awesome. It was mainly a Doctor Who convention, but it was sci-fi too. And she watched Babylon 5 with me back then and stuff like that. And those people were at that Visions convention as well, which was really cool at the time. So you're right. I guess she does deserve sainthood for that. But jumping back in, where were you at on this episode? Like, what is your background with Doctor Who, and how was this episode for you?
Okay, well, first off, this was an absolutely wonderful episode. I deeply enjoyed it, and it was one of those things where second, third watches, I enjoyed it even more. And it's, again, if you only watch the thing once, highly advise you just stop listening right now, hop on, pull it back up, and watch it a second time, because there's little thing I like about Doctor Who is you get these little clues as to what's going on, what's going to happen, and how the Doctor's going to save it. And I think that for me was knowing how it ends, going through saying, oh, okay, I see that. Oh, I didn't notice that last time. Oh, cool, Doctor. And I'm doing high fives to myself just for the Doctor. Now, my history with the guy is very limited based on, well, one, by comparison, but even just general knowledge of the Doctor. I started watching, with David Tennant, and it was really, I only started watching because of you really talking about it. I knew who the Doctor was. I knew about the regenerative thing, but I didn't, and I knew he was called the Time Lord, but I didn't know really anything beyond that. I knew the one guy with the scarf, and there was another guy with a hat, and that's how I knew the Doctor. I'm like, oh, isn't that the scarf guy? And that's the hat guy. And that was about my knowledge of the Doctor. It was really you talking about him, just in general conversations and whatnot, that kind of got me watching. I'd watch an episode here, watch an episode there. I kept catching Christmas specials just because it's, special. Oh, I'll watch that. What's this about? Oh, that's kind of neat episode. That's kind of cool. That's neat. But I never really had any deep connection and, oh my God, this is awesome to the Doctor. And it wasn't until as time's going on that I have a fondness for him, and I record the episodes as they pop up on BBC America, and I watch them eventually. I'll have a Doctor Who marathon, but it's not, definitely I'm still learning who he is. I'm still trying to figure out everything, and with watching this episode, there was stuff I was like, hey, I wonder if this is new story. Is this canon? What's going on? And I have a lot of questions, just a general, hey, is this? Is this that? Is this? With this episode.
Well, this episode puts in a lot of changes, which is really interesting, because it's one of the things I love about time travel shows is the ability to have one event make pivotal changes to what would be considered quote-unquote canon. But it's done in a way where it doesn't throw anything out the window. I love that kind of stuff. It's something that's real interesting. One of the big changes about this, though, is it changes the Doctor numbering. Because now we have this Doctor, John Hurt's character, who is technically the 9th Doctor, which was supposed to be Christopher Eccleston's character. Although, I don't know, and I'd be hard-pressed on this one, because I guess I don't pay a lot of attention on the show to if they identify themselves by number. I don't remember them identifying their incarnations. But even if they did, because of the fact that Matt Smith's character kept saying throughout the episode, this was the one that I forgot. This is the one that I wanted to forget. The identity that I have, the person that I was, that I don't want to remember as being a part of the numbering. Even if he even if they did reference it, that line right there fixes everything because he chose to forget that, and it's something that would fit the way that the characters worked. So that part was really interesting with the fact that this new character, this John Hurt character, has only really had 2 appearances.
Well, here's the interesting thing with this. Now, you're mentioning, I was thinking the whole time that John Hurt's character appeared before the first Doctor. So in my mind, I was thinking, okay, this is Dr. Zero. This is the original guy who, when he transforms, when he regenerates into what everybody knew as the first Doctor. Because I never knew where the series originally began. I thought it started after the Time War, after Galifianakis, falls. Did you say Galifianakis?
Yes, you did.
I know it's Gallifrey, but I'll be honest with you, when they first started, thinking in my head what I'm going to say, I kept saying Galifianakis. I'm like, that's the actor's name. And I had to rewatch the episode again. You're like, oh, it's Gallifrey. Okay, but I figured I'd throw it out there, just because there was a period in time when I kept saying Galifianakis when I mean Gallifrey.
What happened was there was the original series that ended with the 7th Doctor, Sylvester McCoy, and the show went on a hiatus, for an extended hiatus. Really, the only way to get Doctor Who was through novels originally, and then audio. Big Finish started doing audio productions. And for me, who was a huge Doctor Who fan, that was like, wow, we've got, at least some options for Doctor Who. The novels actually had an ongoing story in them. So they were, you would read the first novel, that would go into the second novel, the third. So there was a continuity going on in the novels, and that was kind of your continuation of the series with the 7th Doctor. Eventually, they did a combination of BBC and an American production of Doctor Who. That was the one-shot movie with Paul McGann. And I really liked it. It just didn't go anywhere, though. It was one of those things where I would have loved to have seen it go into series instead of just being a standalone movie, because I think he was really good as Doctor Who. But I don't know if it was the way that it was marketed. It just didn't grab an audience the way that the traditional Doctor Who did, at least on the American side. It's I don't know what happened there. And I think the show wasn't really given, at least in my opinion, it wasn't given enough of a chance. At the time, X-Files was airing, and I was baffled that it didn't air right after X-Files, because it seemed like that would be the perfect opportunity for another sci-fi show, especially a classic one like Doctor Who, to perhaps grab an audience. Why wouldn't you do that? But that's neither here nor there. Then it went kind of back to the other again. Then it was relaunched with Christopher Eccleston, and that's where this Time War thing came in. We never saw that on screen. That was always he was talking about that like this was this pivotal event that happened to him that drives kind of the darkness, because he was more of a I don't want to say he was a darker Doctor, because I really quite liked his character, but certainly compared to the other two, he was one that had clearly been through something. And it wasn't clear if it was his incarnation or one before. That was something that was established over time. So the John Hurt character, there was one episode this past season, right before this Day of the Doctor, that introduced that character, that Doctor.
Yeah.
And then there was this. So no, that was not something that was established that Doctor existed previously, other than we'd been given bits and pieces and tidbits along the way. It's been kind of a mystery since the relaunch of the show.
Yeah, so I guess there's now an extra number. To me, it sounds. I would say we now have
13
Doctors, and they even said it in the Day of the Doctor that there were 13 Tartaruses.
Well, there were 13 Doctors,
right?
And the reason that's significant is they're only supposed to have 13 regenerations. So this next one, after Matt Smith, is supposedly it. Now, he had a nemesis, the Master, and I think you've seen him maybe in one of the a couple of the episodes that you've watched.
I think I've seen him, and I know basically he's a rogue Time Lord.
He used up all his regenerations, and he's found clever ways to continue existing. So there is precedent for a Time Lord to extend beyond their 13 lives. I don't know what that's going to look like for the Doctor. This was something that as fan, growing up as a kid, I grew up with the fourth Doctor, Tom Baker. You didn't really think about the 13th. This was something that was slowly ticking down. I was more on the other side of things. He was still a young'un.
I'm curious if they're going to change lore, if they're going to do something, if they're going to tweak it. Because, as you said, with dealing with time, dealing with supernatural and whatnot, you can change stuff and you can make it happen. And if it's the regenerative energy, and I'm assuming, this is my assumption, that the reason there's not Beyond 13 is that he uses up all his regenerative energy. Mm-hmm. Well, if there's a way to restore it, recharge the battery, jumpstart it somehow, or figure out another way to siphon in more energy, you could continue on Beyond 13.
And that's what the Master used to try and figure out ways to do. To extend that life beyond what it was. They did reference in the episode that all 13 Doctors were there. All 13 TARDISes. I'm ready to call TARDISes. TARDISes were there. So that was the first real appearance of the next Doctor, being able to see him as well, which I thought was really great for this episode. I really liked the way they played everything out, with winks and nods. In the beginning, with the opening credits being like it originally was when the show kicked off in the black and white.
Yeah.
And starting off in Trotter's Lane, where in the Coal Hill School, that was where his granddaughter Susan went to school. And the first two companions who were teachers from that school, Ian and Barbara, came from that school. So that was a nice wink and a nod with Clara working there. Back to that. Okay. And the headmaster was Ian Chesterton, who was one of the very first companions of the Doctor way back when. So that was like a cyclical wink and a nod for longtime fans without being so... I think there's a danger when you do things like that you do too many of that, and you do it in such a way that it becomes such a pivotal part of the episode that you alienate the newer fans. I liked the way they did that kind of stuff because it made me feel giddy as like the new fan, but I also, when I was watching it with Mariah, I didn't have to feel like I had to sit there the entire time and explain every little thing that was happening in the episode, because I thought they laid it out in such a way that those were background things. They were just there for us who knew to like smile and feel connected to, but the show still remained accessible. At least I felt that way.
Well, you want to know something cool about those scenes? Because when I watched those scenes, I was like, oh, okay, kind of neat with the school. Now, I was sitting there, the way it started in black and white, I'm thinking in my head, okay, this has got to be a nod to the original Doctor. Now, I didn't know how there was the nod or anything, but just the fact that how it came through, it had that opening looked, like more like the original style than what the modern stuff, and then the black and white to the school. I knew there was some type of connection. I just didn't know any of the specific details. But it's a longevity of the show where, you can get those kind of feelings for it. You can see that, but it didn't. There was never any kind of distraction or anything taken away. And actually, I'm like sitting there as you're talking, I'm like, oh, that's cool. I'm glad now I know where it comes from. That was a really neat play.
Oh, it was a straight nod to the first episode, which I really appreciated. I'm like, wow, that's really neat that they brought all that in. And it's interesting that with this being a show that's gone for 50 years, that it hasn't had a reboot. It's still the same continuity. Things have changed because of time and all of that, and you've certainly got to stretch, certain senses of your imagination as far as you could probably go back through the 50 years and poke all kinds of continuity holes in the show. But because it's time travel, there's so many things that could have happened off screen that could explain all of that. That's where the show gets away with it. There's a certain amount of elasticity that this particular program, I was called it a podcast, this particular program has, that has allowed it to have that resonance. And I quite like that, because it does give it the chance to, with a new Doctor and new writers and a new showrunner, to really all of a sudden reinvent itself in a way that's satisfying for both longtime fans and accessible to a brand new person. Because they always talk about how a certain person is your Doctor. And you'll see people interviewed especially during, this anniversary season, about this person's their doctor. For me, it was Tom Baker, because I saw him on a black and white television in the 70s. It was on a PBS station. It was on at half-an-hour intervals throughout the week. It was Monday through Friday show. And I happened to catch it during the summer. And it was like 11:30 at night on PBS, and I ended up catching this thing just on a whim. And I was mesmerized by the whole thing, and ended up just watching it every night after that, captivated by the way they did this. And then the PBS station that I had had the Tom Baker episodes. So when it eventually switched to Peter Davison, they had bought them in a bundle, so they restarted the Tom Baker one. So I saw him regenerate into Peter Davison, but never got to see those for like a little bit of time after that, because they reran Tom Baker's again before giving us the Peter Davison episodes. So he regenerated? He's gone? What? And I never knew what happened. So he remained my doctor for two full viewings before I even got to get really into the idea of another guy after him. So it was just interesting to see that happening when he became one that I was attached to. Are you enough into the show? Because, obviously from your comments, you're a very casual fan. Are you enough into the show that you feel like one of them is your doctor, or are you just kind of still feeling the whole process out? Where are you kind of at on that? I'm kind of curious if how invested you are.
I would say David Tennant is my doctor. Yeah, and Matt Smith's absolutely wonderful, and I like Matt Smith's companions. David Tennant as the doctor. So it's like, Matt Smith, David Tennant is my doctor, but Matt Smith's companions are my companions. Those are the ones I really like, because I like the strength of the companions that Matt Smith has with him. Now, I'm not knocking definitely not knocking anybody that Tennant had, because he had absolutely wonderful companions. But there was just something about the Matt Smith's companions, with the Ponds, with Clara right now. And just, there's some, I don't know, I think probably because now I'm more into the universe, I'm now looking at the supporting cast and the people around him. And I'm like, oh, okay, these are really cool characters.
Now, what do you think it is that makes David Tennant your doctor? What is it that draws you to him? Are there specific qualities or something that...
Well, I like that casual funness of him, but I think Matt Smith kind of goes, but there's that darkness that kind of is etched in him. There's that seriousness that comes out, whereas with Matt Smith, he has that fun, but I think David Tennant to me is a little bit more serious. He's a fun serious. Whereas Matt Smith seems like he's fun, but he knows what he's doing. So I don't want to sound like I'm knocking Matt Smith, because I'm not. He's an absolutely wonderful doctor, and I get that same vibe from each of them. And in Day of the Doctor, seeing those two together and just operating, I was like, man, this is hysterical. This is absolutely wonderful. For example, there's the one scene that every single time I saw it, I laughed, even when they just showed a clip of it, when they're doing the behind-the-scenes discussions of it. And it's that scene when the time hole opens up, they both pull out their glasses, put it on, then look at each other, they go, oh, yeah, like that. They do that little kind of goofy little wave to each other about they're both putting on different glasses. Every single time I see that cracks me up. And that's the kind of vibe I like from the Doctor. But then... for me, Tennant then goes more into a little bit more serious after that fun moment, back into I am the Doctor. And that's, I think, the vibe that I like better from Tennant over Matt Smith.
It's funny that you mentioned that, because I'll talk about Tom Baker a little bit. When I was a kid, and you saw this guy in this ridiculously flowing scarf and, this long coat and, just the clothes, the outfit was just very different than you would see somebody walking down the street in. There was something wondrous about it, though. He did exactly what you're saying, where there was that humor, there was the silliness, but then, he could shift to being deadly serious. And when he did, I think it was the silliness, the whimsical wonder, that balance of, A to B often made the serious situations have much more impact. And I'm talking about a guy who's running through the same corridor over and over again. Even though they shifted camera angles to make it look like they were running farther.
Yeah.
In the 70s, you had to suspend your disbelief that people who are wearing rubber suits are really aliens and stuff. And they did that. And I think the same quality of acting is present in today's version. It's just that the special effects are there to match it. And you get that same sense of wonder. Actually, I was connecting a lot when you were talking about what you loved about David Tennant's Doctor, because those are things that I really liked about him. And the darkness, you're right, is something that has been weighing on him throughout this run since Christopher Eccleston, when they relaunched it, because of this Time War. There's been a deep darkness to this guy, regret, that ongoing theme. Matt Smith's Doctor has been kind of a gradual evolution away from that, because I think he hit some of his darkest moments with what happened with the Ponds. Did you see the last episode with the Ponds?
Oh, yeah. With the Weeping Angels, right?
Yeah. Having to let them go in that moment was something that I think was a very hard pill to swallow for him.
And actually, this is one of the things why I don't want anyone thinking I'm knocking Matt Smith, because he does have those really cool moments, like the ones you mentioned with the end of the Ponds, with the I can't even think of the name of the place where his tomb. Name of the Doctor, was that the episode?
Yes.
Yeah, that one where you really see, he has some really cool moments in that one where, again, you do see that darkness. And in the Day of the Doctors, where he's actually referencing, I was at such and such place. I can't think of what it's called off the top of my head.
That's appearing in the Christmas show.
Yeah.
That all of that is, and that's one of the things that I really like about this show. I'm sorry, I'm cutting off. I'll go right back to you. That's one of the things I like about this show is that things aren't throwaways. They will talk about the site of his tomb, the site of his tombstone, but it's all in a build to leading to the story where we see him confronting that, and that's what's coming. And go ahead, I'm sorry.
And that was the thing where you do get to see that same darkness in him. And I think what it was in the Day of the Doctors episode where Rose is talking to the War Doctor, saying, hey, we have the Doctor that regrets and the Doctor that forgets. And it was those kind of moments where I realized, okay, here's what's going on. And even the discussion between Tennant and Matt Smith back and forth about, forgetting. And he forced himself to forget. He forced himself to avoid the darkness, which is why Matt Smith's character, to me, is more of a jovial, more of, had more of the goofy and funness and kept that going. And it was something that got me going, oh, okay, that makes sense now. The way this guy was reacting and acting throughout all the different dark and negative stuff, this is why he did that. He forced himself to be more goofy. He forced himself to be more jovial, whereas Tennant held on to the darkness. And it was something that, again, it was that kind of that moment of clarity that made me say, dang, this is a really good Doctor. And I'm sitting there going, wow, he's really cool. And I'm like, wait a minute, he's dying. Oh, dang it. Just as I'm like, this guy is awesome. They're going to kill him off. Dang it, what you doing to me?
One of the things in the build-up to this show that I really liked, and you probably didn't get to see a lot of this, they did, at the end of this episode, they showed the War Doctor, John Hurt's Doctor, turning into what will be Christopher Eccleston's Doctor. And I really wish they found a way to get Christopher Eccleston to do the episode just to show the full regeneration. I geek out at that kind of stuff, but I'm glad at least we got that. We got to see, okay, this is when, because what they did as a prequel to this, they released 2 little mini episodes, and they've been doing this more and more with the in between, like the seasons. One of the mini episodes took Paul McGann's Doctor, the 8th Doctor, the one that only had the one episode that he really did on screen. They had him do a short, like 6-minute thing at the most, where it was him regenerating into John Hurt's Doctor. It was like his moment of, making that switch. So we got to see a couple of regenerations that we haven't seen before. The only one we never got to see where it was really both Doctors involved was this one with John Hurt to Christopher Eccleston. We didn't get to see him switch to Christopher Eccleston, and we also didn't see Colin Baker turn into Sylvester McCoy. And it was just kind of the way that things worked out with the show, that those things didn't happen. But I'm a fan of seeing the changes, the regeneration. It's something that I think sets this program apart, is its ability to change the lead actor completely to the point where it's not just somebody else playing that same guy. The actor's personality comes into it. the way that the show is written changes. The Doctor takes on a new form, younger, older, whatever, based on who the actor is playing him. And that's something that goes all the way back to the second Doctor, Patrick Troughton, who really did this awesome job of establishing a different Doctor from the first one, who was an older man. So I thought it was really cool that the show's just been able to always do that and keep it going. It's something that, for me, I think has kept me captivated. I'm always dreading when a Doctor changes. Like Matt Smith, I'm very invested in him right now as the Doctor. I'm dreading the Christmas episode because Peter Capaldi's a great actor. So, I mean, having him come in and be the next Doctor, I think that's great. I like him. But I'm so invested in Matt Smith right now that I'm like, I don't know that I want to see another guy take over right now. And I think that's a sign of how great the show is, because I've felt that way since the relaunch with all three of them. I think they've all brought something unique to the table. They've added a sense of wonder. In their own way, each grouping was very definitive. They're very different. Like David Tennant is uniquely different to Matt Smith. Both of them are uniquely different to Christopher Eccleston. Even though it feels like it's one big show, one big story, and there's little threads that continue on all the way through, it still feels like each one of them has had a definitive role in keeping this sense of excitement and wonder. So, I don't know. Do you get excited now, like knowing that there's going to be a new guy come Christmas? Or where are you at? How does that work for you?
I'm definitely excited to see what happens. But, it's funny, as I said, with this Day of the Doctor, it kind of clicked. And I was like, dang it, I finally understood this Doctor, understood what he's about, and got to see some really cool, moments from him. And I'm like, I don't want to lose him, because I also don't want to lose his companions. I don't want to lose Clara, because she is just an absolute wonderful companion that, she's a great character. I would follow a spin-off of her, just, her doing her thing and her helping the Doctor and doing whatever she's going to do. But that's, again, so I have these very deep mixed emotions where there is excitement, there is, oh, dang it, but there is a curious going, I wonder what this guy's going to be like. And I've pulled up some images of him. I've seen, trying to figure out and going, okay, this is going to be a completely different style of Doctor than I've ever had. Whereas you've probably seen this, I'm assuming he's going to be a little bit more serious, a little bit more mature. He's not going to be the kind of style that Matt Smith and David Tennant, where he's going to have a different flow to him and a different groove, which you've seen, but I've never seen in a Doctor. So that's where I'm kind of going, this is going to be kind of interesting. I'm kind of curious to see how this plays out now because of these deviations.
I think one of the things that gets me the most excited, I say that with, this part of me that wants to hold on to Matt Smith staying as a Doctor right now, but one of the things that gets me the most excited is what you're talking about where, what elements of previous Doctors is he going to have, but more importantly is what new is he going to bring to the table, because they've all done that. That's been a consistency with every single actor who's played the role. They bring in something new, and that was something that I really liked about it. Talking about the episode, I loved the whole unit being brought in, the archives, when the whole opening where they kidnapped the TARDIS with him in it. I thought was great, because you can have that kind of, and I think it's important in Doctor Who, that you have a certain amount of fun and wonder and silliness in spite of the great darkness, because even the John Hurt's Doctor, the War Doctor, we refer to him as the War Doctor, but there's so many elements of him that I was glad we got to see he wasn't all dark either.
Right.
When you were talking about the joking around between David Tennant and Matt Smith, I loved when he came on the scene. I was really afraid that he was going to be a downer. Yeah. It was the opposite. I think being with them, we got to see, wait, this guy really is the Doctor. He really is them, a younger version of them. And wrestling with this major problem of, there's this huge war, and it's not just about the Daleks and the Time Lords. It's really about, if these two continue battling, these two factions, they are going to destroy the universe as we know it because of the scale and scope of what they're doing. It's a lot like, actually, we're reading that Superman story right now where, you've got Hel-El poking holes all over the universe. Yeah. They're faced, the Doctor Who universe is faced with a very similar problem there. You can't let that war continue. So he's left with this, horrible choice of how to know more. The Zygons world actually referenced in the episode, their world was a casualty of the Time War. So he's left with this whole decision of, is it worth destroying all of these innocents to say, destroying millions to save billions? It's a hard argument to go again. You know what I mean? I don't know what I would do in that situation, but that kind of need, because he basically is committing genocide of two different races, at least under his assumption. That was something that I really loved the play out of it. I thought for sure the end result of the show was going to be that the John Hurt Doctor would accept what he has to do and just go and do it. I love that it didn't play out that way. I love that they just spat in the face of continuity and said, no, this is what we're going to do. Because that's what it's a time travel show.
Yes.
And sometimes you need to do that. Sometimes it's a Doctor Who treads that line of, sometimes the Doctor has to make that choice to say, you know what, forget it. We're gonna do this anyway, even though we shouldn't.
See, that's one of the things that I absolutely love about the show is you get these last-minute miracles. You get these last-minute, holy crud, the Doctor did that. Because I'm sitting there watching this going, okay, yeah, here it comes. It's the end. And then all three Doctors are there, and they all three have their hands on the big red button, and they're just about to push the button. They're just about to destroy the universe and say, hey, you know what? This is all of us doing this. We're doing this for the people. And you get this real, I'm like, man, but just that little bit from Claire, like, but you're the Doctor. But you're the Doctor. And then they're like, yeah, there's three of us here. Wait a minute. And then all of a sudden, boom, 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 they just start, spitfiring, coming up with an idea. And all three of them go, oh, yeah, that's what we'll do. Yeah. And I love just that. I was sitting there going, yeah, come on. And I'm cheering and hooping and hollering, and it was just a great moment where you get to see the hero. You get your dun-da-da moment but it's, the science coming through, and then all of a sudden all 13 Doctors are there, and it's everybody working together, and I was just like, I'm sitting there cheering. Now, again, I don't have a lengthy history with this, but I was still excited to see the old clips of the old Doctors popping up on the screen when they called the High Command. This is the Doctor. This is the Doctor. This is the Doctor. I'm like, hey, cool. And I had no idea who these people were. Never watched a single episode of them, but I still cheered. But I still enjoyed watching it. I think that's a part of just you get into the character, you get into the story. I don't have a lengthy history, but I still get it. I get the concept behind it. I get the feeling and the vibe behind it. And that was something that really, again, pulled through. And I was hooping and hollering, cheering, just like everybody else. And I'm relatively new to this.
Well, one of the things that I really liked is they established the need for that with the whole sonic screwdriver thing when they were trying to get out of the door that wasn't locked. But that was a cool way through a segment that made us all chuckle and smile to establish this idea that, wait a minute, if he programs it in his sonic screwdriver because their lifespans are actually hundreds of years later, this calculation will actually complete because it's the same software by the time it hits Matt Smith's Doctor.
Yeah.
I thought that was a cool way of establishing what would happen at the end and the need to bring in the other Doctors for that cameo.
Yes.
And that was I liked that they did it that way. They could have tried to force, and I mean, there's that geek in me that would have loved for this to have been a 6-hour special and you found a way to get everybody in. But the show has a history of, they did an episode with Colin Baker and Patrick Troughton called The Two Doctors, where they could have brought in the other Doctors, but the story called for really the two of them. And I can't pretend that I know the backstory of that. I just remember loving and enjoying the episode for what it was, with two great, Doctors coming back in and, having this crossover. It's a wink and a nod to the original Three Doctors episode, just having three of them in. There was a Five Doctors episode that happened with Peter Davison that Tom Baker didn't come back for. And William Hartnell was already passed on at that time. So they had all of the surviving Doctors except for William Hartnell. Because he was no longer with us, they had another actor play him. Tom Baker, because it was too close, I think, for Tom Baker, he didn't want to come back. It was too close to his run. And he kind of wanted to distance himself from being the Doctor, because he did it the longest, technically. Mm-hmm. That, there's a history of this show of doing a crossover where it makes sense. You could also overdo that. You don't want the Doctor crossing his time stream that much, because then it doesn't have that special flavor to it. I like that this was the first time that it really happened.
Yes.
In this run.
Oh, I agree. And I like the fact that, because when, Matt Smith first came in the groove, I was like, man. And you were the one who kept telling me, no, he's a really good doctor. You should watch it, man. You should watch it. He's a really good. And I really wasn't kind of watching it because, as I said, David Tennant was my doctor. I was like, I don't know. And it was one of those things where it just kind of, got put on the back burner, and I never really watched it. But then I would, let me catch an episode. And it was that building, once again, rebuilding and reestablishing myself to the Doctor Who universe. And I was like, okay, yeah, all right, I see. Oh, that's the Ponds are pretty cool. What's this? What's their story? Oh, okay. And I found, as I said, the companions for Smith, that I started getting more attached to and more connected to. And it was something that, I know going forward, I'm definitely continuing watching the next season, the next Doctor, just because I now get it. I'm like, keep watching, Jim. You'll enjoy it. This is still the same universe. Little tweaks and twists. Don't spoil it for yourself. Enjoy it. And I think that's something that I've kind of learned through my first transformation from one Doctor to the next Doctor. And now I'm used to it. Now I'm adjusted to this. So I'm looking forward to the next one. But there is that if they had brought in Tennant before this, it would have thrown me off even more from getting that to establish and enjoy myself with Matt Smith as the Doctor. So I'm glad they waited till now. I'm glad they waited to the end to bring everyone together for the 50th. This is a great time to pull them in.
I had the same thing with Peter Davison because he was the one after Tom Baker. And you were mentioning you're latching onto the companions at first. And I was having the same thing with Peter Davison because the companions were the same ones that left off at the end with Tom Baker. So they were kind of my gateway. Like I had already become attached to them with Tom Baker. It was Nyssa, Tegan, and Adric. And they were, characters who I knew from him. So we've got like this new guy basically being the Doctor, very different because Peter Davison was a much younger guy and it was just kind of a whole new outfit, a whole new direction. It was the first time that I'd experienced it in Doctor Who. It was the companions at first until I really got used to him. Now I'm very, very fond of him as the Doctor. I thought his run was amazing because he had some very sophisticated stories during his run that I really quite enjoyed. But it was that initial kind of like, whoa, what's going on here? New guy. After 2 run-throughs of watching Tom Baker, I was ready to see what happened. But I want to know now. It's like, okay, I watched all this and I loved it both times through. But like, he turned into a new guy and I still haven't seen that yet. What does that look like? I actually saw it in comic books first because Marvel had done a reprints of Doctor Who comics. In the U.S., and they did a full-color series. And my first time reading, it was either in the comics, might not have been. It was either in the comics or novels, because Target was releasing novels at the time. So I read Peter Davison's Doctor either in a novel first or in comics first. And I'll be honest, I can't be 100% sure which it was. But then when he finally aired on our PBS station, that was, for me, like my first exposure to this whole idea of there being a new guy. Back to this episode, one of the things that I really liked was with the way that the whole time wormhole thing worked out, this idea that neither of the previous Doctors were going to remember the meeting. So, that was established pretty early on. We leave with John Hurt's Doctor not really realizing that they chose to save the universe.
Yeah, I thought that was a really cool part of it, that he leaves there thinking he destroyed,
or the galaxy, yeah.
Yeah, he destroyed the galaxy. He did this heinous, he killed billions of people. And he didn't really. He saved them. He was the Doctor. And that was the thing that he had, that where he didn't feel he was worthy of the title of the Doctor. And even, Tennant and Smith said, hey, you're not the Doctor. It was one of those hatred towards him, it's just that anger towards him because of what he did. And you find out, no, he is a Doctor. He is the Doctor. He did do this unbelievable thing where he completely defied odds and saved everybody. But he doesn't know it. And, Tennant doesn't remember it. Only person who remembers it is Matt Smith. And I'm wondering when he goes on to the next how their memory. That's something I'm also thinking.
Well,
kind of curious is when Matt Smith goes on to the next Doctor. That Doctor will remember this.
Yes,
and because you think about the ending of the episode where where he's like Gallifrey falls no more. And it's out there somewhere. And because I'm watching this episode going, man, this is going to be cool. I can't wait for him to hunt down Gallifrey. Wait a minute. What do you mean he's dying next episode? What? And so then I'm like, this ain't going to happen. When's he going to look for his home? When's he going to do this? But again, this is the Doctor. Everything continues on. So I'm kind of curious to see where this goes through the journey because, will the next Doctor start the quest? Will the next Doctor have something else they have to deal with?
Yeah, I don't know. And I like that open-endedness. This is now another part of the mythos. I really liked, though, the way that tied up, because I thought John Hurt's Doctor, right before he gets into the TARDIS, thanking both of them for letting him be the Doctor again just for that moment, because he knew that he wasn't going to remember any of that. And that meant that David Tennant's Doctor also wasn't going to remember it.
Right.
I liked their individual goodbyes because it established this sense of, yes, it's making a drastic change that affects Matt Smith's Doctor and beyond. But because of the way this whole timey-wimey wormhole thing worked out, the other two aren't going to remember what happened. All that that John Hurt's Doctor knows is that Gallifrey has vanished, assuming it's destroyed, and the Daleks are destroyed. I always throw an extra R in there when I talk about Daleks. And I think it's from when I was a little kid. But that's something that for him, he doesn't know that Gallifrey actually disappeared into a pocket universe, and the explosion that he was seeing wasn't in fact Gallifrey, because of the fact that he changes right after that. So he's assuming that he causes that event, which goes back and fixes so that everything that's happened so far in the current series has in fact happened, but in present day, Matt Smith has his pocket universe with the Time Lords still out there. Are they still in existence? Are they still alive? That ending with Tom Baker was, for me, a geek fest, because he's a senior Doctor. All the three before him no longer alive. So bringing him in as the one that is the oldest that's still around, the fourth Doctor, I thought was a really great ending. I would have geeked out to have seen all the rest brought in. There comes a point where I'm very torn on that, because you can overdo that in the show and it starts to become a little hokey, where all of a sudden you're losing the great story that was told here. To me, the story allowed certain opportunities, and I was really glad that when the opportunities made sense and were appropriate, they gave fans a wink and a nod, but they didn't derail the story. I thought the story was something that was gripping all the way through, and I really cared about seeing the resolution to it in a contained story. The whole thing felt like one big special that was very contained. You referenced the Christmas specials that you've seen more of, and it might be something, I don't know if, and I'm making an assumption here, but please tell me if I'm right or wrong. One of the things I like about the Christmas specials is they're very contained. They're a lot of fun to watch. You get a good beginning, middle, and ending. They're pretty tight as far as stories go, and very satisfying. This had that feel for me. It's what I like about the Christmas specials. Did you get that vibe from this?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. And your comparison with the Christmas specials, and one of the reasons I enjoy the Christmas specials are because they were such a contained thing. But again, this was one of the things that it kind of, the tragedy and the joy go hand in hand a lot of times. And that's something I think I really enjoy about the Doctor Who universe, in that we do get these great uplifting moments, but we do get death and tragedy. Think about just every time a companion has died, every time, with me, with the Ponds, with the Christmas special where Clara was introduced and her character dies at the end of it. And I'm like, what? And then I see her later on in another episode. I go, oh my God, she's not dead yet. Wait a minute, what's her story? And the whole exploration of the Impossible Girl and everything about her, how she kept appearing in Doctor Who universe, how she was there, she died saving him, and just all these different appearances of her was something that I thought was kind of a neat concept, but especially the fact that it doesn't have that chipper, sunshiny, happy ending. There is death. People are gone, and main people that you figured, oh, they're going to survive. There's no problem. Look at them. They're a main character. They'll be fine. No, they're not. They're dead. And I think that is something I enjoy about the Doctor Who universe, that they're willing to kill off main characters. They're willing to kill off popular characters within the confines of the story and make it something significant.
Yeah, that's something that really, for me, I think has been pivotal with the show. Has been that there's been, like, I remember Adric died on the show. He's one of the characters, which won't mean anything to you. But for me as a kid, watching Doctor Who and seeing that character die on television was like, wow, they actually did this? Because I was very used to, like, the Doctor winning or surviving. You know, one or the other. It wasn't, and that I quite liked that as a kid too, where sometimes it was just about escaping and surviving and all that type of thing. But you didn't see main cast members have that happen. The show, I think, has done a really nice job in the new run of making good choices as far as when something's fatal, when it's not, keeping it upbeat while at the same time not being afraid to explore darker topics. Those type of things are, really, I think, an important part of the show is a balance of, you can tell any kind of story in the Doctor Who universe if done right, and balance is important. Have you watched any seasons from beginning to end?
Probably not. No, there's been gaps and pieces that I've missed, and I think I catch. I'm like, one of the things that'll happen is I'll look at BBC America and I'll say, okay, by the title and the brief description, I'm like, I don't remember seeing that. Let me record it, and I'll watch it later. So I get pieces here. There's stuff from David Tennant. I was sitting there going, hey, I don't remember watching that. Let me record that. And so it's, that's, as a casual Doctor Who fan, is a very good description of me, but it's a casual Doctor Who fan that is growing into more of a loyal Doctor Who fan. That is, I get the groove. I'm especially with these last couple episodes, this last couple stuff, I'm like, okay, I get the groove. I want to get the backstory. And I'm sitting there trying to figure out ways where I can get the old Doctor Who episodes. I can start watching the stuff in the past, and actually see full seasons, full Doctor runs, And so it's, definitely, I'm not there yet, but I'm thinking actually probably with this next Doctor, I'll probably be able to say I've seen from beginning to end.
With the newer Doctors, one of the things that I've really liked about the show is, and this is something that I think is kind of a unique UK television thing that I think Showtime and HBO has adopted, and shows like The Following, newer shows like that. This idea of shorter serialized seasons that are very tight in their storytelling, where there's things that happen in every episode that further the main storyline, even if they're things that are happening in the background that we don't realize at first that are important, but come back later on, you're like, oh my gosh, they've been teasing this all the way through. Doctor Who's been very big on that. And the reason why I'm throwing that out there as we're talking about this, for you, and in particular anybody else who's listening that maybe isn't like a diehard Doctor Who fan, hasn't seen a whole season yet, I highly recommend, maybe start with the new Doctor after watch the Christmas special, then start up with the new Doctor, is watch the upcoming season from beginning to end, because it's something that's been established as a part of this series, that there are things happening throughout the season that are going to pay off later. They might be the most simplistic thing that was in the background that you thought was nothing, that turns out later to be like this dire, pivotal thing that is important at the end, that makes you go, oh, I'm so glad I watched all those shows, because that was really cool to know that was there. That kind of stuff is happening. And that's why I reference, the Showtime and HBO shows, because I think it's a lot of the reasons why those programs are so popular, is they have very tight storylines, tight seasons. I know you're a fan of that kind of programming as well. And it's something that I do think, owes the series aspects of how UK television is, where they tend to have shorter seasons. I think a lot of what's going on American television right now owes a wink and a nod to that. And Doctor Who certainly embraces that, because the series length so far has been very similar to how those channels outline their seasons. So, I don't know, it's something that I highly recommend. And actually, forget my recommendation. Based on what you've been watching, do you see yourself wanting to jump on a season coming up?
Yes.
Okay.
And that's a quick and easy yes, a solid yes. It's, again, as I said, this is coming up. I really foresee this being the season I watch from beginning to end, just because I get I get the mythos of the Doctor now. I really do understand. I've lived through a transformation. I've lived from, okay, now I see it and I've understood. And the stuff you're talking about serializing, where it's that, the whole story, I've started understanding that. And I've started seeing that and kind of piecing it together in my own little head about how they really do build on each other, how each one is a next step and the next evolution. It's not just stories being told. And that was when I was a casual fan, when I was just looking one episode here, one episode there, I didn't realize just how much they build on each other. And lately, with the last couple episodes, I've really kind of, I get the groove where they don't say to be continued, but it really is. You will get an evolution of the story. You will get this character coming back later. You will get a piece from this story is told here. A piece from this story is told here. And example, I can't think of the characters. The female lizard lady, her friend Jenny, and the potato guy.
They were actually his. They were actually his whole mystery squad. That was, and I really liked how they used them as reoccurring characters in the series, because it added this whole sense of, as things got darker with the Doctor, especially before Clara came in, it was neat that they were kind of the ones investigating mishaps that were going on in history. They were the ones that were basically taking on his role, as his allies. Before he kind of went back underground again, which I thought was kind of a neat evolution for the character again. But you were right. They were really neat to see as a reoccurring cast. Because I grew up with Unit and things like that, which we'll talk about again in a minute. But I'm so glad you threw them out there, because I think they're fantastic.
Well, because they were, for me, my introduction to them was the one Christmas episode, the Snowmen episode, which was Clara. When she was there back in Victorian England. That was the first time I saw those characters. And I was like, okay, these are kind of interesting characters. What's going on here? And once again, I was able to follow the story, even though I hadn't any background, any other existence of these characters. And, when I saw them again later on after others, I'm like, oh, okay, these are fun characters. These are neat people. This is something that I was like, okay, I get it now. That little bit that we saw before, here it's playing out again.
And it was Madame Vastra, and I'm butchering it right now. Jenny Flint and Strax. And I want to listen to the episode again when they pronounce her name, because I thought because she and Jenny were together, they were a couple.
Yes.
And I really liked how that played out. And it was funny how there were times when they would make a joke of the fact that people were more questioning their relationship because of the fact that they were two females than the fact that she was an alien.
Yeah. I got more issues with that than they do with the fact that we have this lizard person who, I'm like, okay, you don't have an issue with that.
Right.
I did question, and Strax is just an absolutely, again, one of those funny characters that he would throw out the one-liners of combat and we must kill and decimate, and the one episode where he gets lost, he pulls out his blaster, he's about to shoot the horse because it must be the horse's fault that he's lost, and little Thomas comes in and gives him advice and directions like, Thomas, you will do well. And I'm like, Tom, this stuff like that, those little moments, I cheered, I laugh, I find it funny, but then it doesn't take away from the seriousness, the coolness of the episode. It doesn't become a goofy slapstick thing. There's this bit of funny, bit of laughter back to the show, and I think that is a great, kind of vibe and a feel.
And that's, I think, a key to the balance that I was talking about earlier, because you can mess that up. You can go too far, do it too much, and it becomes slapstick and silly. And those moments, though, when they happen that way, just kind of work. I want to talk about Unit, if I could, for a minute, because I grew up with the Tom Baker years where he was still working for Unit when he first transformed. Robot was the first episode I watched of Doctor Who. Actually, it wasn't Robot, it was the Sontaran experiment, but I ended up catching Robot in a replay. But in the cases I'm mentioning, Tom Baker's Doctor was still a member of Unit. He had been, in the previous incarnation, he'd been exiled and trapped on Earth. He was just now, he had his TARDIS back, he was able to start traveling again, just regenerated in a new body, and he still had some ties. So I knew about his companion at the time, and both of them were associated on some level with UNIT, and that was like my exposure to them. Her dad, that Kate Stewart, her dad, Brigadier Alistair Gordon Lethbridge Stewart, was like a really cool part of the show because he reoccurred a couple of times during the Tom Baker run and then also reoccurred with later Doctors afterwards. So he's this fond character that like would come back into the Doctor's life much later in his life, but would still remain like this longtime friend of the Doctor. And that connecting, that I forget the name of what they called the machine, where the Doctor was connecting via voice into the room. That was a wink and a nod back to that past relationship, and that was a device that the Doctor did give the Brigadier, and I liked how they did that. That's a great example again of not overdoing it. You know, it was explained in that sequence. If you do it too much, you can't explain all of it, because it becomes your show's got too much explanation in it. It's going to make people's head hurt. But to throw that in there as just a little quick wink and a nod. And did you feel there was any point in time during the program that they were throwing in too many?
Actually, exactly the opposite. And everything you're saying, sitting here, I'm nodding because with Kate Stewart, and she mentioned her father, and then later they mentioned with the telegraph and all that stuff, and just the little nods, and even the one time when she's like, access my father's accounts on the Doctor, you know, and she threw out it was Timus or something. It was, I can't remember what she said the case name was, but you know, she threw that out there. And as I'm watching this, I'm like, okay, her father must have been a character in the previous Doctor episodes. This isn't just a throw out there to tie into the past. He actually was a character, and in my head I knew he had to have been a character. I had no idea the length or the connection of the Doctor or any of that stuff, but there was enough of a contact that me, who understands the theory of the Doctor and understands the stuff, can go, okay, this is where this is coming from. And same thing with like the Black Room. I understood why, you know, there would be such a room and why they would make it Doctor-proof, because they've had such lengthy dealings with the Doctor. They've had these multiple year, 50 plus years of dealing with Doctor to understand and get the groove of knowing who he is. And I love that feel behind it and just where it came from. It was it was enough for me to keep the story moving, but there was a curiosity I was having about, because she's one of those characters that I had a question I was going to ask you about her, and just see where she comes into the picture and, how that all plays out. So that was something I was like, this is neat. It's like the opening. This is a neat thing. It must be a nod to the past. I don't know all the details, but I know enough for this current story I'm watching to continue on and be enjoyable for me.
And when the Doctor worked for UNIT and for years afterwards, he always was big on keeping advanced alien technology, alien weapons, I should say, out of human hands. He also didn't want technology getting into human hands that would advance the culture more than it should be. So he was very cognizant of that. So them locking that stuff up, knowing what he would likely do, destroy it, or take it, makes sense. That's why it was Doctor-proof. And I really liked that there was just a nod to, because he worked for a number of years where he was exiled on Earth where the TARDIS didn't work. He was trying to get it working again, and the show was very Earth-based for a while during John Pertwee's era. And it's cool to see how that era has such an influence now on the present day, but you don't need to know all that. So it ties up really nicely for fans that have watched all of it, and I think that balance is something that's unique as well. Because if you've got 50 years of program where there's all that baggage that you have to know, and I think sometimes this is where comics get it wrong sometimes. Let me explain that. Continuity is not a bad thing. It isn't something that pushes people away. Here's a show that's got 50 years of continuity. And I'm going on not just the television program, but novels. Because the novels fit into a lot of this, too. There's a number of novels which still fit into canon and still exist. Still really could exist as having happened. They haven't really been contradicted, maybe a few of them. But, there's been no conscious effort to really contradict anything that's happened in the past. It's been more of the show just continued on, and neatly things just kind of, because they do casual winks and nods to the past, things still work and they still feel relevant to people who watched it all those years ago. Where I see comics sometimes get it wrong is when there's this kind of, there's too much continuity in the past, and boy, you get bogged down on it. No, I love the excitement of the fact, like for you, here's the excitement. You've seen certain Doctor Who right now. All of that's relevant. All of it matters. You don't need to go back and watch a whole bunch of old stuff in order for your Doctor Who to be relevant. But there's going to be a new guy coming up, and everything you've already seen, Jim, happened. It's relevant. It's still a part of the show's history. This is the same guy who had all those things happen. And wherever you start off on this program, that's your experience with Doctor Who. That stuff just is relevant and matters, but you can start anywhere. Really, somebody, if they didn't watch the 50th anniversary show, can start with the Christmas special coming up. They can move along. There's going to be a few things that they're going to be nodding to that happened in the past that they're just going to have to figure out along the way. But the show's going to fill you in with everything you need to know as you start progressing through the series. It's a very accessible program, yet it hasn't thrown out its rich history. I think that's something that comics can learn from, because I don't think it's a bad thing, and I think your continuity is something that people latch onto. Those stories happening and mattering, and still being a part of the history of the program, I think is something that's very relevant to Doctor Who. And I think for comic fans, if you've never watched Doctor Who, oh my gosh, you so should. Because I think it's a show that's tailor-made for fans of serialized storytelling, because of the fact that it's continuity, even though there's been new writers, new actors, different companions, as you're referencing. They change with the era, but all of it matters. All of it's a part of the show's history still. But it's not so overwhelmingly bogged down in your face that it's inaccessible. And I think there's something for fans that have seen all of it. I've seen everything, at least in some capacity. I wish some of the episodes that were lost were in existence, but I've seen various versions of them that have been put together by amazing fans with a lot of patience, who put together the telesnap versions of them with the full audio that still exists, just because I wanted to see everything of this show. But you don't have to,
right?
Which I think is awesome.
And actually, as you're sitting there talking, I'm nodding completely with you about just, the understanding of the Doctor Who universe, the continuity. I've got a pretty comfortable grip on it being a casual fan and coming into this. And you think about 50 years of history, I should be, bogged down. I should not understand. But that's something about the writing, that the writers, when they're creating this stuff, they know there's going to be new people coming in. They know there's a history. They recognize that. And I think that's something that really impresses me with how they're crafting their stories. And just by making the characters really interesting, really cool, and just how they're presented with the problems. There is sometimes a suspension of disbelief, you got to deal with. But you know what? And when it gets down to the actual fact, when it gets down to the doctor actually solving the problem, I tell you, the strategery of the doctor always wins out. And this is one time where I will defend the use of the term strategery. If he can say timey thing, I can say strategery when referring to the doctor, because I think he would actually like the word and would accept it as a possible word.
Oh, crap.
I'll argue that one with you, because
I don't know that I don't know that if he's throwing out timey-wimey, I don't know that I can disagree with you on that one. And I really want to disagree with you on it, but I'm like, I guess, Matt Smith might throw out strategery. And David Tennant would groan.
David Tennant would definitely grow. Yeah. John Hurt would probably smack me, for saying it. But Matt Smith, I think, would like the term. He may even use it. I think he would actually accept that as a possibility of adding to his vernacular, which I think, for me, justifies the word, and we'll continue to hear it on this podcast. But serious conversation. I do like how the show lays out the solution. Like, with example, with the Day of the Doctor, where we kept getting the little pieces, the ground up stone on the ground. Then, the first time they called back to, when they first introduced the concept of the paintings, they introduced the concept of the artwork where it freezes it's a 3D painting, a moment frozen in time. Just that introduction of that concept, and how later everything got played out, and just again, from beginning to end, with the doctor calling back saying, hey, move the painting into there, and then planning on putting themselves in. And it was just all these different things that had to play out for the doctor to win. And I love that because I found myself figuring it out, the twist, a second before it happened. And that, for me, is something that every time I watch a Doctor Who episode, I usually get that. I don't see it coming, so I enjoy it even more, where I'm like, oh, wait a minute. The reason they crush the statues is they're underneath those covers. Wait a minute, they're about to die. Oh, crud. And as I'm coming up with this solution, so is the character inside the show. And I think that is something that makes me enjoy the show, even though I don't know the full backstory. I don't know all the history. I'm right there in the moment with those characters.
Here's a question I have for you. I don't know if you fell into the same category I did. As the show went on, I found myself wanting to see more of John Hurt's Doctor. Like, I want to see some of his backstory. Like, how did he get to the point where he was at? Because there's a history there with the character that we don't know. You know what I'm saying? There's, like, this bubble of his life and his presence as the Doctor that, like, now that we've seen him in the Time War, and I'm going to say that's distinctly different. Like, I found him the first appearance that I saw him in was at the end of the Doctor Who episode where they introduced him, where Clara went through and saw all of the Doctors. Did you see the episode where John Hurt was first shown?
Yes, yeah, that was where they go to his tomb, and we finally figure out why Clara is in all those different time spots with the Doctor.
So you saw him for the first time there.
Yes, I saw him there.
That was a very dark appearance by him, and I didn't feel this kind of fondness that I feel for him now. Now I want to know how he got to the point that he got to where he's like shooting the wall with no more. Like, I want to know more of his backstory. Am I alone in that, or do you feel that way?
Oh, God, no. I'm definitely in with you. And that was the thing why I had questions about him for you. When I was watching the episode, I'm like, okay, I got to talk to Norge about this guy. And then you said, especially, because I knew we were going to do this episode, I knew it'd come up eventually. Because, as I said, I was thinking he was Dr. Zero. He was before the first Doctor, before the very first introduction of the TV show. That's what I thought is how it came through. I thought the Time War happened a long, long time ago. I didn't know it happened before the Ninth Doctor. So that was something that I didn't know where it was coming from. I didn't know his backstory. And I was planning on asking you and finding out what was said about him, if anybody knew. So I'm definitely in the same boat as you, where I do want to see more. I would like to see a little bit more of his life, and especially the lead up to the No More, the lead up to there, because you think about that council, they really were not happy with him. They were like, oh no, not the Doctor, and just the one called him arrogant, and there's all this negativeness addressed against him. So I really wanted to see how he got there, how he got to that point. And again, it's I'm assuming we will. I'm assuming they're not done with him yet, just because. I think I can't imagine they introduced him just for that little bit. But I don't know what the protocols are.
Well, and that's kind of the funny thing, because now he is the Ninth Doctor, which changes the numbering for everybody else after him, which I really quite enjoy. You're right, that when you're talking about the Time Lords and Gallifrey and the whole reference there, going back to William Hartnell, the very first Doctor, throughout his history, it was gradually established that he was on the run from his people. He had left his people. It first started out with this story that he had built the TARDIS, but as the idea of his people existing started to become more a part of the show, there was this idea that he was a renegade Time Lord. He left and ran and...
He stole the TARDIS.
Yeah, and kind of wanted to get away from everything. And I really quite liked that concept of the show, him being this kind of renegade. And that whole sequence, I'm like, that plays into his history. Because in the television show history, he was actually the president of the Time Lords for a very brief time. Well, sort of brief, because he kind of ran off as president. And so he was sort of still president, kind of, for a decent stretch of the television show. Because he was never, he never really advocated. He just left. So it's a very interesting character with an interesting history that hasn't been necessarily contradicted by anything new, which I think is hard to do.
Now, something I'm curious about with the twists and the turns that happened in the episode. As I mentioned, the crushed statues and the shapeshifters hiding underneath the blankets, the fact that the Queen Elizabeth I was actually the real queen and she'd taken out her doppelganger, and just the big ending where all the doctors come through and save the day. Now, with me, as I said, I saw it coming a split second before they announced it on the show. Now, but what about you? Did you see this stuff coming? Because you have a better feel and groove for who and what the Doctor is?
No. I will say, it's one of those things where you can look back through the episode. At least I did. I was able to look back through the episode and see the signs of certain things.
Oh, yeah.
But I think I was so glued to everything and so enjoying the ride. I don't know that I was trying to figure out things before the episode revealed them, as much as I was so trying to catch every reference that I could, every wink and nod that I could. I think that's the kind of thing that I was more interested in at the time. And the story I thought was so captivating that I didn't find myself going to, did you find yourself trying to push far ahead of what was happening right in front of you, or more trying to, because there was a lot going on.
Well, that's the difference between you and I. I watch, and this is because, as I said, I don't watch every episode, but I realized early on when I first started watching these episodes that they're going to give you the evidence if you figure it out. So whenever I watch a Doctor Who episode, I am trying to figure it out before it actually happens. I'm trying to piece it, but that's just the way I always watch these episodes, because I've learned that, okay, there's going to be enough clues. If you think about it, you can figure it out. And I kind of erase the Doctor. I've had a couple episodes where I think I figured it out before they had the big reveal on screen, but as a general rule, I figure it out a split second right as they're about to reveal it. I usually figure it out then, or I've had a couple where I was like, whoa, didn't see that one coming. Okay, outstanding. But it's, I think, a real, for me, an enjoyment that they keep giving you the pieces. They keep giving them right as the people on screen are figuring out, I'm figuring out. And I think that's something why I enjoy these episodes so much. When I do sit down and watch them, I'm like, oh, that's cool. Here's a statement about Doctor Who. I don't remember ever watching an episode where I said, that's okay. I every single time I sat down and I watched an episode, I always said, wow, that's a really cool show. But for some reason, I never locked in and made sure I watched everything and went back and tried to find the back stuff. And I still in my head don't know why I didn't do that, but there is something every single time I watch an episode, I've always enjoyed it. And I've always said, okay, this is a cool show.
You know, with the question you asked earlier, normally I do that. Especially during the regular season, I'm looking for clues and trying to remember things that happen in episodes that might be throwaways, because I want to solve the mystery of the season. I want to be able to, or at least be able to reference back the clues from the season. Here's what was my focus on this one. It was the War Doctor. Is he going to push the button? And if so, what is going to cause him to do it? Because I guess I was assuming it was a foregone conclusion that the show was going to end on some level, at some point, with him pushing the button. Him coming to the realization, I still have to do this. It was going to be something revolving whatever happened with these two, with Matt Smith and David Tennant, that was going to make him go, I need to do this. It looked like it was going to be because he was trying to put them on the right path, which is the way the story went. So I was more focused on that than any other part of the story. So that was, I think, where my first watch, where my mind was so heavily. What is going to lead this man to do this? And they got me, because I did not see that ending coming. I did not see the other two coming in and saving the day until I saw Clara get out of the TARDIS. That was the part where I'm like, oh, wait a minute, this is not going to go clean. I didn't think that it was going to go the way where she was going to convince them to do something else. But I figured that there was going to be some critical moment with her on some level. I didn't see it anywhere near. I'm not going to say I saw it going where it did, because I didn't, and I loved that. I loved that her emotional response felt so real to her relationship with Matt Smith's doctor and what she knows about him. That plea came from a very personal, interpersonal connection between the two of them. That moment for me was like, whew. But that's kind of where my head was at. I didn't. And it's unusual for me with Doctor Who, And I think that's cool that you and I both watched the same episode, and the way we approached it was very different. Because I think that's a strength of the show, too, because you can do that and be very valid on doing it. Now, my second and third watch, I watched it very differently. But certainly not my first one. I was really, John Hurt's doctor and his whole plight, I was completely captivated by.
Yeah, and it's funny, the other thing about with me and the doctor watching, because a couple summers ago I was in London. I actually got to go across pond, and hang out with my brother, and we took a couple day trip up to London and got to see it. And it was a really neat experience. But the fact that the opening sequence where they're dropping him off in Trafalgar Square, I was actually there, right where the doctor landed, where the TARDIS landed. I was standing right at that spot. So I'm sitting there going, hey, I was there. Hey, there's the big lions. That's cool. So it's, again, another personalized connection that when I was watching the episode, I'm like, that's kind of cool. I'm glad, and it's those moments. And I can see myself the next time I am there, I guarantee you, I'm going to go to that square and I'm going to stand there and go, hey, this is the spot right here. There's going to be a picture of me, with my thumbs up going, I'm right on the spot now. It's, so there's that kind of, again, personalized connection to it that as I was watching, I was like, oh, this is cool.
Yeah, I want to go to the UK in the worst way, just because there's so many spots that I'd love to just see where, there was an episode of the show filmed or something like that, just to go. I mean, it's kind of, I've always wanted to go there anyway, aside from Doctor Who, but because I just happen to really love British television in general. And I got cousins over there, so it'll be a lot of fun to just go.
Oh,
so
God,
that's definitely on my bucket list of trips that will happen. It's just a matter of when.
And I'm glad that the show obviously uses these real locations, uses these real events, Tower of London, just the palace, everything that they have, they're showing them. And they're actually incorporating it as part of the TV show, which you would need to. But again, it's that we have this alien who regenerates time, flies around in a police call box, and has a sonic screwdriver that does almost everything you can possibly imagine just by pushing a single button. But it seems believable. It seems real. It gives you that, that realistic type of vibe and energy as you see the actual events going on around you. See the actual structures and whatnot. And I think, again, that was something I was like, dang, this is kind of cool. And I like the Earth-based stories. I like when they're on planet Earth, when they're doing this type of stuff. The alien planets are really cool episodes. There's some neat stuff that has gone on. But I think for me, I kind of like these personalized when we're getting them right happening on Earth, right there in England, or when they did a couple episodes where he came to America. And, those were some neat stuff seeing them over here. So it's, again, there's some neat parts of the Doctor Who universe it is this crazy thing, but there is this element of realism with it, which is a very odd, bizarre thing to say, but I still get that vibe for it. I still get that understanding. And again, part of it is the realistic of the supporting cast dealing with the crazy nature around them.
Every time you call it the Tartarus, I feel like I should be dipping fish sticks in it or something like that. Tartarus sauce.
You know what? I know I'm mispronouncing it. And to be honest, I'm not intentionally trying to do it. It's just when I first learned the TARDIS, I called it the Tartarus.
Right.
And I always call it that, and I know, okay, my mistake, but it's going to happen. And especially when I get on the groove and I'm talking, I'm going to throw out Tartarus.
I do it with Daleks. I put an R in there that does not belong. I've done it since I was a little kid, and I don't know why, because my first introduction to them was on television. It's not like, I have this deep introduction to them from books. Other than that, I had the Genesis of the Daleks book with Tom Baker, was based on the episodes. I had a hardcover book. It had the Sontaran experiments, the Genesis of the Daleks, and I forget what else that was in the book. But it was a hardbound book. At least I think that's what was in them. I know the Genesis of the Daleks was in it. But I read that book over and over again. I don't know where I get the extra R from, because I call them Darleks. I do. I throw that in there quite a bit. I know I did it on this episode. Aside from naturally getting tongue-tied, which you'll do when you gab as much as we do. But That's one of the ones that when you were throwing in Tartarus, I'm like, what? that's the one. That one I'm chuckling at. Well, you know what it is? That's the long-time snarky fan in me doing it, not like you're doing anything. You're just wrapping yourself around. I'm glad that you're throwing it out so much because the TARDIS is an incredibly important character in the show. When Bad Wolf version of Rose, the one that was basically the consciousness of the weapon. And I like that use of her. We didn't have to do anything with Rose's continuity. She was brought in as a manifestation of something from the Doctor's past/future as a way to act as a conscience for him because it was this, symbiotic, or not symbiotic, really, this living embodiment of this weapon that was talking to him. But I really liked that she noticed that he came into that shed, that area, away from the TARDIS because the TARDIS is a living machine. It's alive. And he did not want to make this choice in front of the TARDIS. That was something that would hurt him and he would be embarrassed because that relationship with the TARDIS and him is so strong. I liked that. I mean, that it was done very subtly, and there was a lot in this show that was done subtly. And I think there's a certain point to doing that. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Well, I'm glad you threw out the stuff with Rose and the Bad Wolf, because I knew Rose kind of, with her run. I saw a couple episodes with her, with Tennant and all that. But I don't remember ever seeing the Bad Wolf episode. I don't remember so that was something that was a reference. I was like, why is she calling herself the Bad Wolf? I never saw anything like that in there. I just knew I knew who she was. I knew the connection with Tennant. And I chuckled. I was like, oh, cool. When Tennant's like, Wolf? Wait a minute. So I'm like, okay, there's something that happened in his run.
It was actually Christopher Eccleston's run that led into the David Tennant run. The whole first season of the show with the reboot, or relaunch. The reboot's a strong word because it really was a continuation of the program. But that was the big mystery of that season, Bad Wolf. And they would land places, and on the walls would be Bad Wolf written down there. And this all paid off towards the end of the season. And I'm deliberately being vague about it because I highly, you're talking about like maybe going back and watching some of the seasons. You're going to want to watch that season from beginning to end and kind of see, because there's nothing I've really said that really ruins anything for you.
Okay, so this is the Eccleston run.
Yeah, he was in one season.
Okay.
That was his very first season of the show. And we actually just saw John Hurt's character on that episode turn into what would be Christopher Eccleston's Doctor. That's kind of our first foray into that, but that was one season that he was on, and the Bad Wolf story plays out there.
Okay. Yeah, I gotta figure out a way to get my hands on some of this stuff, and I think it's time for me to start delving more into the Doctor, and it's this is because one, I'm enjoying what I'm watching, but two, I'm like, I got to see this. I want to see beginning to end. I definitely want to see Tennant and Matt Smith beginning to end, because I saw peace here, saw peace there. I got to figure out, BBC America does some great, keeps broadcasting them, so I'm slowly recording stuff on my DVR, and eventually I'll have seen every episode, but I think seeing the flow through of the season would be kind of neat.
They're available on DVD, and some of the seasons are available on Blu-ray because some of them were before they shot them in HD. Mm-hmm. But they're also on things like Netflix, different streaming services like that. And like you said, they still re-air them. But you should also check on your, every so often our cable suppliers have those, you can want to watch streaming services and stuff like that. Check and see if some of the episodes are available on there, because sometimes they'll throw a whole season of something on there. And it wasn't a long season. It was like 13 episodes, I think. So they're like the HBO and Showtime references I was throwing out there earlier is pretty valid. They kind of do the same thing, and they're very tight and contained. And that's one, if anybody asks where to start, I would start with his season, because that's kind of the reboot. And if you get through that all the way through to, from David Tennant's to Matt Smith's, and you want to go back, then you I would say go back to Hartnell and start watching the black and whites, and because if you really want to get into the older material, I would start with the black and whites then and start working yourself forward. But I think you're better served modern day, because they seem to have the mythology that's modern day starts with Eccleston and works his way forward. So I would start with that first, and then go to the older material, which I think is great. I'm a big fan. I still watch the older material. I love it. I think it's just great. But I would say for a newer fan, I would start with the newer launch with Christopher Eccleston straight on through to present day, because that cyclical kind of references and nods seem to be really the heaviest with that. And you liked Torchwood.
Yes.
That first season introduced a lot of the mythos from that. I'll kind of leave it at that point. That's a good way if you like any of the spin-offs that have come out of Doctor Who, such as Torchwood, which Torchwood was stellar. I hope they do more Torchwood at some point.
Aerith, let me throw out a question to you. Because and this will be harder for you than it is for me.
Okay.
But favorite companion. Do you have one? And two, who is it?
Sarah Jane Smith.
Okay. That wasn't so hard.
No, here's the reason why. Very similar to Tom Baker being my first Doctor. She was my first regular companion. I basically saw her almost her entire run with Tom. She started with John Pertwee, but mainly was with Tom Baker. I remember when she left the TARDIS, I was like, what? What do you mean she's leaving? That was like, I was a kid. That was crushing, because she was kind of your gateway into the Doctor. She was the one you were kind of riding along with. Kind of like how Robin goes with Batman. How Robin kind of is your, you want to be the one sitting at the passenger seat of the Batmobile. Well, you want to be the companion in the TARDIS. And Sarah Jane Smith was your one that kind of made you understand what that was like. That was that character for me. And she had, her own spin-off show for a while. Unfortunately, the actress passed away quite recently. I believe it was last year. If not, it was the year before. But she had a really cool show, Sarah Jane Adventures, that I ended up seeing all the episodes of that. It was a direct spin-off of Doctor Who.
Oh, cool.
And she got to meet David Tennant's Doctor. They had her on an episode that actually predated her having her own show. They had her re-encounter the Doctor again. She was the one, when she was on this run, it was so great to see her back. That was kind of my geek out moment, because it was a nod back to my childhood. That, it wasn't, actually isn't that hard. But out of the current runs, who was my favorite? I'd say Rose. So that would be out of the current batch. I would say Rose. Okay.
Yeah, and I'm Clara. Just I keep throwing her name out there enough. I figured y'all would guess that. And it's in a way it's kind of I have to say because she's the current one. And a lot of times I am a kind of guy who's whoever's currently in front of my face, but the stuff that I really dig about her is strength of character and just everything that we're seeing her. You mentioned the reference to Robin and Batman. Why is Tim Drake one of my favorite Robins of all time? Because he was his own. He had that strength, that standalone hero to me. Clara's got that same standalone hero quality to her to me, especially when we saw with the Name of the Doctor episode, where I understand why she is the impossible girl, where everything came about with that. I was like, okay, that's some cool stuff. The Ponds were great. Ponds were awesome. I really digged them. Really enjoyed the stories I was playing out. But when it came to her, I was like, okay, this is somebody who should be with the Doctor, who gives an extra bit of energy and strength to him.
Out of the newer companions, I would have said Rose first and then Amy right behind her before the stuff they've done with Clara. Now, Clara clearly, for me, has become just a really interesting, unique character. I've really grown to enjoy that character. How cool was it on the 50th anniversary show where she jumped on the motorcycle? When your doctor called for you, and did he give a location? She pops on the butt. It was one of those moments, we talked about it earlier, the sense of wonder, the sense of excitement. There's an energy in the way that sequence was written that just drew me right in. I love that. That again, that's the gateway I was mentioning earlier. You got it totally. When I threw out the Robin reference, she brings that into the show. 110% agree with you on that. Because when she was riding that motorcycle, I'm like, I want to hop on a motorcycle and go too. I love when she spun it out into the skidded into the TARDIS. I thought that was really great. And just how happy they were to see each other because it meant more adventures.
Yeah.
Like that vibe, just for me, that was why I always reference back to Tom Baker. Tom Baker always had a sense for me of adventure. And as a kid growing up, to have it was like a positive show, with yes, things were scary and there were dark sequences and stuff like that, but there was always this vibe that with the Doctor's goal was there was a positive energy there. And I felt like this 50th anniversary episode, Matt Smith in that moment with Clara and him, that really captures that cool part to the point where I thought it was really appropriate that he and Tom Baker ended the show together like that. I really loved that.
Yeah, and it was funny because I knew who that was. When I was watching the episode, I didn't recognize his voice, obviously, but once I saw him, I was like, oh, okay, yeah, I remember him. He was one of the doctors. I knew he was one of the older doctors, and I was like, oh, okay, it's kind of neat that they brought him back into it and that he was there. So it was one of those moments where it had a significance to me, but I knew you would have a much bigger connection, especially now that I find out he's your favorite doctor. So that's like, oh, okay, it really was a cool thing for you.
It was a geek out, but I thought he being with Matt Smith, there was something about. I think there's a good energy between those two. I thought that was really, really cool. Hey, do you ever watch Little Britain?
No.
Okay, I was gonna say he's the narrator of that. I didn't know if you caught that one because that was a common show that you might have caught. But I mean, he's just one of those. For me, he's the rock star icon of the Doctor Who universe, and it was just really great to see him associated with it again, because for so long he didn't want to be. And I'm glad that he's kind of re-embraced it and recognized its importance, because especially now, with him being the senior surviving man to basically drive the TARDIS, it's great to see that. Is there anything else you want to say about the episode? I think we've certainly covered a lot.
Oh, I definitely think we have. Here... I'm going to throw out something goofy here. And again, this is going to be something that people will laugh at me about. But one of the things I find and I do this with any British television I watch, but especially for some reason with The Doctor, I catch myself either thinking or speaking in a British accent while the episode's going on.
Do you really?
And you have no idea how much of a struggle it was for me while we're talking not to just slip into my very bad British accent.
Why do you think that is?
I don't know what it is. It's something goofy, and I do it with British television more than anything. Like if I'm watching, actually, to be honest, when I watch my swamp stuff, I sometimes catch myself doing a little bit of Cajun speaking while I'm watching that. So I think
you're pulled into the world.
I'm pulled into the world, and I really enjoyed that British accent. I really do enjoy how it has kind of a sing-songy quality to it. There is, especially with a couple of the different characters they've had this just very, it's a really, I'm trying hard to describe it. It's sing-songy for me, but it's not. I don't want anyone thinking I'm mocking it or not or saying anything negative. It's a compliment. It's a very melodic type of flow that goes through, and especially with a lot of the characters on the show, they have that kind of cool presence. I'm like, oh, that's neat, and I catch myself getting pulled into it
because you just at that moment you're kind of pulled into that world. That's kind of cool. I'd like to do I got an idea for a follow-up that we can do maybe when the new Doctor takes over. It might be fun for us to watch an old one and watch the new single episode for the new Doctor. Talk about your experiences with watching an old one, like an old one that you've never seen.
Okay.
Yeah, because that's very easy to do because you haven't seen any of them. But I'll try to pull a good one, like a classic. Yeah. You know what I'll do? I'll pull a Tom Baker one. Okay. Because I'll pull one of the ones that are one of my favorites. I'll find one that I consider to be one of the better ones, or at least one of the more memorable ones for me. Because it would be fun to do, in the spring or something like that when the new Doctor. We won't do the Christmas special. We'll do the one like his first full episode. It'd be fun to, with the new Doctor, do a show where we talk about him. How do you feel with your first new Doctor after Matt Smith? Also, how do you feel with it being in older, watching one of the older episodes with the rubber suits and things like that? Do you get pulled in the same way that you do with the more modern effects and things like that? And what do you think of the stories? But I'll pull a good one that would be one that you'd really enjoy watching, that I think holds up well. So I'll watch a few of them and try to pick one that I think is my favorite. Or at least I'm making the assumption that it holds up real well.
Okay.
I think it'd be a fun episode. I think it'd be a fun episode.
I'm all in.
Yeah. I think that'd be a fun way to kind of give you a taste of the old stuff. So it's fun.
There it is, going into that tunnel.
Hi, this is Jack again, and I got to say, I've got something to shout about. All right. Like the Sensei, I, too, experience budget problems because, thanks to a certain pair of podcasters, and the high quality of DC Comics, I'm now getting not only the entire DC line, but also the entire Vertigo line. And that's kind of squeezed me out of the Marvel books that I like. And independents, I pretty much can only afford Godzilla. Well, I found a thing called the Marvel Unlimited app. And this thing is like, you sign up at the Marvel website. It's $10 a month, so it's not expensive, but it gives you access to like 50,000 Marvel comics. It's ridiculous. It's huge. And then every week they send me stuff on more. So, you know, if you're like me and you got no budget for Marvel, $10, you know, and it's like one lunch, and you can still get a little bit of a Marvel fix mixed in with the DC stuff. The other thing I wanted to ask you guys about was, okay, Thor: The Dark World #2, a film I really liked, by the way. It is doing much better worldwide, and it's doing very well in the U.S., and it's going to blow out the original Thor record. Or not the original Thor record, it didn't set a record, but the original Thor profit, you know. The original Thor made $449 million worldwide. This is going to do better than that. Now, a lot of that people are attributing to his role in the Avengers. So, with Man of Steel, or with Superman versus Batman coming up, which should be an absolutely huge movie, and I can't wait, are there any DC characters that you would like to see make a cameo in that film or play a smaller part in that film that you think might then be able to springboard into their own movie? And then that springboard would be helped by being in Superman Batman. Anyway, so thanks a lot for a great show, and I will talk to you later.
Yeah, you know, it's funny. I guess I'm really torn on this one, and this might be an unpopular comment. I don't want them to overdo cameos, because I think it's funny, it's kind of appropriate on this episode we were talking about what I liked about that Doctor Who episode, was they didn't do too much, but what was there was very rich and relevant to the episode. I've heard rumors about Wonder Woman possibly appearing in this. Great. I think that would be fantastic. But I think there's going to come a point where if you put too many characters in, you're going to diminish them, because you're going to either try to do too much with them or too little with them, and there's nobody that's going to really benefit from the cameo. I think if you do Wonder Woman and there's a way to maybe do a wink and a nod, or use her in a way where we start to get curious about her, excited about her, or something like that, that works great. And I would say Wonder Woman, take out Wonder Woman and plug in any other character and put him in there. I wouldn't want to see more than a couple of cameos, just because I think you're going to, and maybe you disagree with me, Jim, and if you do, please feel free to chime in after I'm done. I just feel like there comes a point where it'll be, like, cheesy to have too many of them. Now, if at the end there is, like, a teaser where there's a reason for Superman and Batman to meet up about an oncoming threat, they're looking over a dossier of people that they're trying to bring on board, and it's on a bad computer or something like that, and you see a quick splash of Wonder Woman, a quick splash of this character, that I would geek out over. But I'm talking about sprinkling it throughout the film. I want a Superman and Batman movie to be about Superman and Batman, and that's where I'm kind of at on it. But like I said, I'll take a caveat at the end where they do those little teasers at the end. If they can sprinkle in there, you know, a dossier and a reason for Superman and Batman to be analyzing a team to put together for some reason, I would be completely cool with that aspect of it. But what about you? Where do you want to see cameos? Who would you like to see in a cameo? You don't have to agree with me.
Well, I do and I don't. I would like to see people in there. I think a splash of Wonder Woman in there. Mm-hmm. When we talked to Arrow, I thought that'd be a neat way to tie in the TV show and the movie. And with that tie-in, I would actually do Oliver Queen as opposed to Arrow. Yeah. And I would have the actor who's currently in Arrow make an appearance in the movie some way. And it could even be a very blip about Oliver Queen, and they show him standing there just to let the people who are watching the TV show know, hey, guess what? There's Green Arrow. And let the people in the movie go, okay, yeah, that's your way to find out who Green Arrow is. I would like to see something like that. Would be kind of neat. But as just a splash of a character, introduction kind of moment. I think I would like that better than the picture dossier, better than the ending, like the hidden credits like they do with the Avengers stuff and they did with all the Marvel. I love that. I'm not knocking it, but I think what they could do is somehow tie it into the middle of the episode, somehow put it within the middle of the movie, that same type of splash, that same type of hint of something coming down the line. I would like to see that.
But I don't think it's going to do what he's talking about with Thor.
Right.
What happened with Thor and why that worked, and this is where I would personally rather see it, is in a Justice League movie. Like, Superman and Batman should launch into a Justice League movie. And the only reason why I was saying dossier, because my feeling is at this point, if you're going to build them into being an introduction into more of the DC Universe characters, you need to build this into a Justice League movie afterwards. And I don't care if it's a dossier at the end or something like that. I would like some kind of nod that there's a reason for these two to be in a Justice League movie together. Like, whatever's going to put the two of them in a conflict and bring them together, or whatever's going to happen with them in this particular film, I wouldn't mind seeing something at the end to indicate that there's something bigger on the horizon for them. What that is, I don't know. But that would be where I would like to see that go. And that's where you flesh out these characters so it does what it did for Thor. Because he's right, the second Thor movie's doing better, and the reason why is because of the Avengers. And why wouldn't it? And I would imagine that a lot of people who saw the Avengers probably rented Thor or bought Thor based on the fact that they enjoyed Avengers, because Avengers was terrific. And Thor, the first Thor movie was great.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm glad to see the second one doing so well, because I like the expanded Marvel Universe and love what they're doing with their films. But to me, a little cameo is not going to help those films. It's got to be, Thor did so well the second time because he was so fleshed out in the Avengers. You got to see him interact with Iron Man and your favorite characters and the Captain America and things like that, that people really got further interested in him from those interactions. That's the way you're going to flesh out these characters. That's the way you're going to get people interested. Get them on that team.
Get them on the screen actually doing something, not a blip. Yeah.
I think the way they're doing it's brilliant. I mean,
I'm enjoying this.
I think Superman, Batman, to me, and I'm not saying you're not saying that,
right,
but to me, I'm excited for a Superman, Batman film because it's a little different. We didn't get a Marvel team-up movie, and that's not a knock on the Marvel films. What I'm saying is I like the fact that they're taking two of their prime characters and saying, we're going to put these two together on the screen, and then we're going to build on that, because we don't have our Justice League story yet. We know what that story background's been like. You know, that's been stuck in development hell. So, like, do this. Do something a little different. You know, let's see two of them spotlighted on the screen, and if you introduce somebody in there, or a couple of somebodies in there, like you're talking about in the middle, at the end, I don't care where, go ahead and do that. All I care about, in all honesty, is that this feels like a very strong Superman-Batman film. Because if you want people to have confidence in the next film, the Justice League film, you've got to make this one a home run. The other stuff, like the background stuff and supporting cast, like you said, would I love to see Ollie Queen walking in the background or something like that, or a reference to him, or, you know, any of those things? Amen. I agree. 100%. That means more when the main film, the stuff that's in the foreground, is much more interesting and great.
Right.
Then when you see those things, you're like, oh, not only was this film awesome, but all those cool references. I want to see LexCorp stuff over there. I want to see, you know, references to, you know, do a reference to Paradise Island or something like that. You know, whatever you want to do, Themyscira. Do a reference to that kind of stuff. Do a reference to Starling City. Have people with little cameos. Sure, that's cool and all that. But to me, to really do what Thor did, why does that work? Is because Avengers was phenomenal. I want to see that movie, Justice League. I want to see a well done Justice League film.
Amen. Agreed completely.
Hey guys, it's Anthony. It's been a couple weeks since I've a little while longer than that since I left you guys a voicemail. Great podcast as always. I always love it. Just wanted to talk about a few things today. Start with the comic book stuff though, real quick. Usually when I call, I talk about classic stuff, but I want to talk about more modern things. And one thing that caught my eye, interestingly enough, is I've been reading Nightwing in trade paperback, the Kyle Higgins run, you know, his current stuff. I don't pick it up in comic book form, but I do pick it up in trade because it's cheaper and it helps cut down on my list. And, you know, I have a pretty big list as it is, so that's pretty cool. I just wanted to state, though, I noticed something interesting, because right now, like everyone else, I'm really digging Forever Evil, and I think it's fantastic. And we know what happened to poor Nightwing in the beginning of Forever Evil. Well, you know, I've been reading Nightwing, and this was even after, a little after issue 3 came out of Forever Evil, so, you know, I'm still really behind on Nightwing, but in one of the early issues, you know, there's a team up between Batgirl and Nightwing, and Dick tells Barbara, interesting enough, because that storyline, the first arc, is about someone who knows, you know, his identity and trying to kill him and things like that. And he tells Barbara, interestingly enough, is, what if someone got my identity? If they did, it's not just trouble for me, it's trouble for, you know, Batman, Red Robin, Jason, you know, Batgirl, everybody in the Bat family. And I thought that was interesting, and I don't know if it's a foreshadowing, but it seems kind of eerie reading that now after what we know happened in Forever Evil. You know, what would happen if Grayson's identity got exposed? So I was wondering if you guys, you know, remember that from happening in Nightwing when he told that to Barbara, and then it got reiterated back, you know, with what happened in Forever Evil. So there's that. Also wanted to talk about something about also in Forever Evil, and that's, I know there's a lot of theories about, you know, who's under the hood, you know, that type of thing. But there's something else that interests me a little bit more than that, and I know you guys have talked about it, but I kind of have my theory too. The Earth 3 crime syndicate talks about a force destroying their world, some sort of entity. And a lot of people think it's Darkseid, which I would not be surprised and would be awesome because I'm a big Darkseid fan. You know, I even own the Jimmy Olsen 134, so there you go. I love Darkseid, but I wonder if this is a setup for something even bigger for later on. You know, I don't think DC would go, because basically we've had 2 events after the other, so I don't think they would go right away to another event. But sort of a prelude to something bigger, and what if the villain is the Anti-Monitor? What if it's the new 52 version of the Anti-Monitor? And what we got some sort of new version of Crisis. Not exactly the same Crisis on the Infinite Earths that we had in 85, but something a lot different. And I love Crisis. I mean, you know, people are mixed on the results, but the story itself, I always tell people, to me, it's one of the greatest superhero epics of all time. It's that sort of Lord of the Rings, you know, that great epic, you know, where, you know, the Ragnarok of superhero comics, where everybody's involved. You know, everybody in the DC universe and all that. So my question is, if it was the Anti-Monitor instead of for a Crisis, what would be the purpose of this new Crisis? Because I would imagine that they don't need to reboot it, obviously. So would it, you know, be a different setup? What do you think if it's the Anti-Monitor? Or would it be maybe even a smaller scale story where a small group of heroes went after the Anti-Monitor? But, you know, he's too big of a threat for that. So just your thoughts on if it's the Anti-Monitor, how would you guys think DC would approach that? So, considering that he's such a big threat. So there you go. The other thing too is I was very amused and enjoyed your conversation about Billy Manilli. I am 30 years old and I remember that as a kid. One thing that amused me though, when you guys reminded me of, was I'm a big video game guy, always have been. I'm a big Nintendo fan, still am. But as a kid, they used to have a very awful Mario Brothers cartoon, and in one of them, Milli Vanilli was in it, and it's on YouTube. It's pretty insane, and basically, King Bowser kidnaps Milli Vanilli, and you guys just got me thinking about that very awful episode of that show. So, the whole show was pretty bad, but it's a nostalgia thing, and I remember that episode. I remember watching it on a Saturday morning, and they kidnap him, and, you know, the princess and Mario, at the end, they go to a Milli Vanilli concert, which is kind of funny. So it's pretty interesting. And if it's a pretty, I know you guys talked about it, but it's actually kind of their story is pretty sad, you know, and if you really, you know, want to watch it, they have that great Behind the Music VH1 special that came out years ago. So I think that's on YouTube and whatnot. So it's really great though. Stuff if you like music history. Behind the Music was a great series. I don't know if you remember that. They had a lot of great episodes. They did one on Weird Al Yankovic. It was really a great show. So, I know you guys are big TV guys. You like to find good shows and things like that. And, I because of you guys, I got into Ray Donovan and things like that. There is a series. It ended last year, but all 5 seasons are on Netflix, and I would highly recommend it. It's a show that I still to this day, it won Emmys, it won a lot of awards. Its acting was just superb. It had some of the best actors that you could come across. But the show never got any recognition. Like, nobody I know watched it, except for maybe fan people on the internet. And I would recommend, if you like stuff like Homeland and things like that, it's a show called Damages, and it ended last year. Stars Rose Byrne and it stars Glenn Close. It's really a great show that, if you like something that's intense like Breaking Bad, it's on that same level. It's about lawyers, but it's really, and it seems like it's a mentor, young lawyer mentor type relationship, but it's a lot more than that. And explaining the plots of each season would just be an insult to the series because I cannot explain it. What it is a young woman, basic gist, debate, becomes the protege in the beginning of the series of a high-profile lawyer. Her life basically starts falling apart, and it's insane. It is an insane series. It uses a plot device where each season starts at the end where it flashes and it shows the results of something, and then as you gradually go, you see why they got there as opposed to how, what happens. You know what happens, but you don't know why. And that's the brilliance of that series. And it's 5 seasons of it being insane. It's really just one of the best TV series I've ever seen, and it's one that's just not watched enough. Me and my best friend will talk about Arrow all day, which is fantastic. But there you go. So that's another great series. And then one last thing, I know you talk about video gaming sometime, and I know Sean's more of a PC gamer these days, which is cool. I just want to know, today I am actually picking up the new Zelda game that comes out, and I'm a big fan of Japanese games personally, Japanese role-play. I still like the Final Fantasies, things like that. I love Zelda. I love Nintendo. I wondered if you guys ever played any of the Final Fantasies, the Zeldas, anything like that. Any Nintendo games. I'm weird. I like Pokemon 30. I played the new one. I like that. I'm not really big into shooters. I cannot stand shooters personally, like Call of Duty. I find them just kind of an older guy who grew up on Nintendo and all that stuff, And I love but I do love stuff like the Batman games and things like that, the Arkham series. But I just wanted to know if you guys have liked Zelda, or even back in the day, if you stopped playing, Zelda, Final Fantasy, any of those old RPGs. I wouldn't call Zelda an RPG though, but new Mario game comes out. What's your guys' love affair with Nintendo, Square, those type of things? So, okay, thanks for the great show. I love your podcast. I listen to it every week. It's one of my first listens, if not my first listen. So, thanks, guys, and you guys have a wonderful, wonderful day, and can't wait to hear the next show. Take it easy.
Let's start with game systems and work backwards, if we could,
okay.
Just because it's fresh on my mind. As far as Nintendo goes, I think Nintendo as a company is absolutely brilliant, and I think that they develop unique and interesting games. There's nothing wrong with, loving Pokemon and Mario and all that kind of stuff. I think that's cool. I've never completed a Pokemon game. I've played the second Pokemon game, whatever it was, and I forget what color it was. I had it on one of them. I really quite liked it. It's really been, that's more of a budget issue for me, has been, I would love to play more. I just don't have the budget for it. Square, I love Square. Square Enix is an amazing company. I've played Final Fantasy VII through the most recent one that was on the PlayStation 3, which I believe was 13 or 12. And I don't remember. It was the one with lightning. I didn't play the sequel. I guess the sequel's either came out or it's coming out. I don't have a PS3 right now, but I played the most recent one with lightning. I think that was 12. And if I'm wrong on that, I apologize. But I played that one and quite enjoyed it. I thought it was a really great game. I know it got kind of critical. People didn't like it so much because it was a little bit different than some of the other Final Fantasies. But I've quite liked the series because of the story. I mean, to me, role-playing games are about story, about great story and interactivity in the story. And I love role players. I am more of a PC gamer right now because of that. Mario games are a blast. My nieces have a Wii, and I had a Wii for a little bit, and it was more of a budget thing. The reason why I don't have one anymore, it got to the point where if I was trying to keep up with all the comics I read and console gaming, it just wasn't working out for me financially. But Mario tends to be one of my favorite go-tos for platformers. I like the Super Mario games that they have out now, the side-scroller ones that they've done, the newer ones, because they're great for playing with other people. And that, to me, is, I think, Nintendo's strength. When they get you in a living room playing with other people on the screen, and it's pick up and play, where anybody, like we were playing as a gamer who's played games my whole life, I was able to do and go for some of the, hidden power-ups and trying to find the pipes that you sneak through and all that stuff. The classic Mario fare, the hidden gems that are in there. But we were playing with Mariah's mother, who does not play video games. She picked up the controller and was able to play because the game has that kind of easy accessibility for somebody who's a non-gamer, but yet something with a lot of depth for people who have played their whole life. And that, to me, is, I think, a strength of Nintendo's product when they do it. So I keep eyeing the Wii U, mainly because of things like he said, like the new Zelda, which that's like the action RPG, and like Kingdom Hearts, which I love from Square. That's actually my favorite Square games, Kingdom Hearts. I'm a Disney junkie, and I played Kingdom Hearts 1 and 2 and loved them to death. Which is a Final Fantasy Disney crossover that has all the characters. What about you? Are you a Nintendo guy? Did you play any of the Final Fantasy games? Or have you been exposed to any of that kind of stuff? I don't know what your background is, Jim.
Well, I think I watched you play one of the Final Fantasy games once. I think that's the extent of my Final Fantasy knowledge. With game systems, like every time I come over to your house, I'll play, sometimes we'll play something, or that's usually most of my console systems. The last game console I had was a Sega Genesis.
Okay.
So, and I'm still eyeballing stuff. I'm looking at the Xbox stuff because Brother Bill, that's what they have. I think that's what they have. I'm pretty sure that's what they have. Yeah, so I'm looking into that system, maybe getting that system, so then I could actually do stuff with them and with my nieces and my nephew.
The 360 then? Or the newer?
I don't know. I'm guessing here. I think I think it's the 360.
Yeah, well,
it's not the very brand new one, so it's whatever's the one before that.
360.
Okay. So that, and one of the things I've been thinking about getting is getting a system that also is a Blu-ray player, because I don't own a Blu-ray player, and I'm thinking, if I get this game system that's a Blu-ray player, I could watch Blu-rays and I can play games. So I've been thinking about that. So I'm still really in a thinking phase. I was planning on buying something this Christmas for myself. My Christmas present was going to be a game console system, but I don't know if it's going to be. I think my present to myself may be new siding for my house instead.
Which you can play on that too.
Right, you can play that too, yeah.
I'll bring you over some crayons and markers. You can play on it all you want to.
Oh, yeah. But yeah, it's with me, games, I like the games when I'm playing them, but I really don't own a console system. I was always a computer guy, and I'm getting away from that because I'm trying to spend less time online, and it's something I've been consciously doing for a while, because when I get so connected, and I'm finding myself getting into habits where I'll get locked into something, and it becomes an unhealthy level. So, and I find with a lot of the computer stuff, it'll do that, and that's part of my concerns about getting a game system is, if I get a game system, will I be locked into that? Will I be only doing that? And I'm trying to spread my time out amongst multiple hobbies, multiple items, just so I can not be locked in.
I found what helps me, doing my gaming in my office. Because my wife's not really a gamer. Anytime I've had consoles, I've bought consoles specifically for the purpose of buying certain games, thinking that we'd play them together, which is a novelty that wears off after the first couple of times that we do it, and then, she's kind of got her own interests that she's not interested in that. I found that it's really helpful just kind of accepting that fact. And the PC gaming thing is not a knock on consoles. I think consoles are fantastic. But what I'm finding is exactly what you're saying. There's a certain amount of time I want to have for gaming, and I'm loving the gaming that I'm playing. Like I have the new Assassin's Creed game. I'm really into that world, and I really enjoy playing those games. I'm still playing Star Wars, The Old Republic, and the new Batman game, and I just got Injustice. I mean, that's a lot of gaming, right there. I mean, these are games that I'm currently in the middle of playing right now. And I've become more of a completionist where I like to play and solve as much as I can of the story aspect of those games. So I try to get to every little nook and cranny. So, with all those games going right now, it's kind of like I don't really have a lot of room for... I used to get myself into the trap where then I'd get a console, too, and I'd have a couple games going on there, and I never was solving anything. I would play certain games and I would never get to the point where I'd finish, and I like finishing the game. I like seeing the end game story. I like seeing the big boss at the end. I like going for all the pickups and things that are in the game. So I found myself kind of paring back. I don't think I play games any less than I did before. It's more of my focus is on playing games where I can do a lot. And like on the Old Republic, it's an MMO. Before I played as a Jedi. I also have and I got to that character, the end game, the level 50 that you want to get to. So now I'm playing as a Sith, which I never do. I never play as the bad guy. And it's a completely different story, playing as the bad guy. So I'm going through and, I'm making choices and decisions in the game like I'm Darth Vader. Mm-hmm. And that's a lot of fun.
Cool.
Because it isn't like the single player story for the Jedi, but where you make bad choices. It's a completely different story. There's some intersecting on certain worlds that you get to, but it's very little, surprisingly, because your focus is different. You go to the same planets a lot of times, but your reasons for being there are different. So you just happen to intersect locations. And that part I'm really digging. So I don't know, I'm into that kind of stuff now, gaming-wise, for a lot of the reasons he's mentioning, though. So, and I miss, like, I see the new Mario game. There's a new 3D one that came out for the Wii U that I'm like, ooh, I'm very interested in that. I just am realizing time-wise, with comics and podcasting and, my favorite shows and things like that. Plus, I'm trying to work out more to keep myself, a little healthy. So I'm trying to fit all of these things in that's part of the reason why I'm not doing the whole console thing now. But I haven't given up gaming by any stretch. I play some things on my iPad, too, which I'm quite enjoying. But there comes a point, like you're saying, where I need a break, and I think I'm giving myself more breaks from gaming now. I'll take a couple of days where I'll maybe do some heavy gaming, and then I'll take a couple of days where I don't game at all. And maybe I just read on those days. And I like kind of I find that I'm enjoying all of those things more now because of kind of spreading it out. So like the past couple of days, because it was Thanksgiving weekend, I did, they had a double XP weekend on Star Wars The Old Republic. So I'm like, I'm going to really have some fun with my Sith guy. So I'm doing that. I'm going and doing bad guy stuff.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of fun for me. So that's been kind of where my choice is. Like you said, trying to find some kind of balance. And I think I've got a good balance now where I don't feel like it's intruding, because that's what you're getting at.
Right.
I don't feel like it's intruding into my life, but I don't feel like I'm giving it up either.
Right.
So I've gotten myself kind of, and it's the budgeting issue, kind of like what's been mentioned on the show earlier. Just trying to find a nice budget where I can still participate in the things that I love while not breaking the bank. Let's talk about Mario to Milli Vanilli, the cartoon. I remember the Mario cartoon. I give cartoons, especially, during certain eras, you give a certain amount of leeway to cartoons because they're targeting different audiences. And Milli Vanilli, I want to clarify, I do feel their story is a very tragic story. Yes. But there's certain parts of it that I think for years was, really funny. The part that I find is funny about the whole thing now is the big deal that was made over the lip syncing thing. I mean, at the end of the day, here's the question. Milli Vanilli actually had some catchy tunes. I mean, like where this whole came from was you blurting out Blame It on the Rain.
Right.
Well, you knew that song. I mean, you knew that song because it was a catchy hit at the time. So, I mean, you can't take that away from the situation, regardless. It was a catchy tune at the time. It's ironic. I don't know that today people would have been as upset Do you think they would have? Because lip syncing's become a lot more prevalent now.
Well, the only thing that people were upset with is the fact that it wasn't their voice originally singing. It would be like me lip syncing to a Frank Sinatra tape saying, that's my voice. No, it's not, Jim. You're just lip syncing somebody else's voice. And I think that is and always will be the big issue. Now, if, because present day, people are more used to people lip syncing, but they're lip syncing to themselves. You think about that thing that happened to Jessica Simpson's little sister. I can't think of her name.
It was on Saturday Night Live.
Yeah, Saturday Night Live, where the track and everything skipped over, and we realized, oh my God, she wasn't actually singing. Yeah, well, guess what? It happens always, and especially a lot of these, a lot of these performers who do a lot of high action on stage, and they're really just lip syncing because you think about it, you can't run around on stage and then sing a perfect pitch. If they're able to do that, would be really impressive, and people accept it because of the show. So if Milli Vanilli happened today, it would still be the same level of resentment. And I think part of the reason we get the resentment for the lip syncing stuff comes from them. So it's, it is a tragedy because, they were just people who wanted to perform, people who wanted to entertain. They wanted to, they wanted to make a little money. We all want to. So they were going with the program. They were going with the program. They were told, this is what you do. Okay, I'll do it. And in a way, they were villainified, but they weren't completely the evil villains. They weren't innocent pawns being used. No. They knew what was going on, but they weren't, the evil creatures that they were made out to be. And even to this day, people, won't really recognize that, they were kind of a victim of the machine as well.
But they really were a part of a definitive era.
Yeah. Oh God.
I remember at MTV when their videos came out. I mean, you watch the videos. They had like great videos at the time. So I mean, the purpose of putting them as the public face actually worked. I mean, it was neat. We just kind of got duped. I don't know that it never really bothered me that much. It became funny more than anything else. The story of Milli Vanilli, though, is incredibly tragic. What happened to those guys, the one in particular who passed away, was a tragic story. And he's right, that show Behind the Music, I'm into that kind of stuff, the same way I'm into comic book documentaries and magazines. Not because I'm looking for tragedy. I like to know behind-the-scenes stuff. I get into that kind of stuff. I also get into the cheesy true Hollywood stories and those kind of things as well. But Behind the Music, as a show goes, was really, really good. The sad part is, unfortunately, there's a lot of music tragedy that usually surrounds that show as well when it was on. But I quite like that stuff. And I'm not always into it being bad news. Like I like sometimes when they just give the background history of any band or any singer. I'm always into where their roots are, who their influences were, what their path was to stardom. Was it an easy path, an overnight success, or was it something they really had to work for? And I like the variety of seeing those stories. So those type of shows tend to hit it for me. Same way I like reading articles about people's history in comics and such. Nightwing, leading to Crisis. Or, I think they're two separate things. But did you think that Nightwing stuff was foreshadowing?
Oh, definite. I think there's going to be some stuff happening with Nightwing after the post Forever Evil. Nightwing is going to be a title that is going to be changed, and whether it's changed because Dick Grayson's identity stays public knowledge and he's got to handle things differently, or whether there's tragedy in the Wayne family. I'm not exactly sure how it's going to play out. Now, Bruce has done a really good job with laying out his connection to the Batman Initiative, the Batman, Batman Inc. So there's really good deniability when people start asking, hey, the adopted son of Bruce Wayne became Nightwing. Well, Bruce Wayne is funding Batman, so that's why that happened. So they're going to start looking at the Bat family, anybody close and or connected to Bruce Wayne. And I think Barbara is going to be someone who needs to watch herself because she's connected with Dick Grayson. If anybody does a deep review and a deep exploration on Dick Grayson's past, they'll see the connection between Barbara Gordon and Dick Grayson. And then you see the daughter of the police commissioner that right there would be a prime candidate for Batgirl. So I don't think general public will figure out that Barbara Gordon is Batgirl, but I think someone will put two and two together, and there'll be some villain, and I'm thinking this will be a Nightwing to Batgirl crossover type story. Someone's going to figure out that Barbara Gordon's Batgirl. Maybe, to be honest, maybe Commissioner Gordon will figure it out. I don't know, but I think this is going to play out, and I think it's going to affect Barbara more than anybody else.
Now, I'm a believer that this event that happened on Earth 2 and Earth 3 was both Darkseid. Because the reference to the red skies and stuff like that, I'm a believer that it's Darkseid. I don't see DC going to Crisis right now. Because I think they're trying to, in the New 52, avoid retreading that same story again. And I know he's not saying that. He's saying a new Crisis where there would be new use for Anti-Monitor. And I think that will eventually come back into play. But I think they're only going to do that when they have a new, fresh story to tell with it. Versus, I think right now we've got the Crisis. That's what this Forever Evil story is. That's their current Crisis, if that makes sense. Just it's not called Crisis on Infinite Earths. It's their big, Justice League's involved. All the heroes of the world are affected. Crossover. That's what this is right now. That's not to say that we won't get another Crisis down the road, but I don't think they're... And I could be totally wrong on this. That's just my belief right now, is I don't think they're foreshadowing that at the moment. Would I eventually like to see one in the New 52? Absolutely. Cool. That'd be great. I mean, there's room to do it. I think they're going to need a greater establishment of the multiverse before you do something like that, which we haven't even gotten the Multiversity series. And I think before they do something like that, we're going to get a book like Multiversity out.
Right.
And a firmer establishment of multiple universes before we go that route. That's my personal belief, though. I could be wrong.
See, and I kind of agree with you on that, where I'm in with the group that says it's Darkseid, but to be honest, I was never really thinking Anti-Monitor or any of that, but it could be a different type of bat, and this could be an introduction to Multiversity. Maybe we can see something or someone else affecting multiple universes, and this could be an intro into that villain, that character. But right now, I don't see any big overarching event after Forever Evil's done, because I think they recognize that if we keep hitting one big event after another big event and another big event, we're going to turn people off and we're going to annoy people.
I disagree. So, I'm going to say I disagree with that one. I think we're going to see another event sooner rather than later. I don't think it's going to be bam, 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 bam. But here's the reality to it, and we hate to admit it as fans. Events sell. Sorry. Events sell. And I mean, every time people will say I'm all evented out, sales don't support that. They just really don't. Sales tend to be boosted by events. Whether we like that as fans or not, we would prefer that there weren't them. The truth of the matter is, an event gets people excited. It tends to get people who maybe aren't normally reading that product line to try it out. And history's shown that. A book like Forever Evil coming out, Crime Syndicate, there are people reading DC right now who were not reading it before. Will they stick around? It depends on how the book ends and what they get led into from the story and how they're enjoying that. Well, that remains to be seen. And do they finish the event itself? Because I would be very curious to see what the drop-off rate is on an event. But bottom line is, for the kickoff of the event, and usually there's people who will go and grab back issues of things that they missed that led into the event. They will buy the event, at least the initial issues of it, and hopefully they stick around afterwards. But events do sell. I mean, that's the business end of it. From a fan standpoint, where you're talking about budgets and things like that, the people that say, I'm evented out, it's too much for my wallet and stuff like that, I can totally sympathize with that. But I don't think we're going to see events shelved. We're still seeing events. Think about it. We got a Superman event going on. We got Batman events going on all the time. Events are still going to be there, and I think we're going to see more of them. We saw the Supernatural books crossover quite recently. I think you're going to see more. Now that the books have been established, we're going to start seeing more of that when it makes sense. But go ahead, what were you going to say?
Those are the events I think we're going to see. The in-book events that feel like, you think about Sinestro Corps War, that was, within the Green Universe. That wasn't, but it felt like a massive event, but it was really told within the monthly stories. I think that's the kind of events we're going to get now. We're not going to get the cross-board.
Except that leads to one-shots, that leads to extra issues. Sometimes it leads to spin-off miniseries. In the case of the Sinestro Corps War, that wasn't contained in just those books. There were lots of one-shots that went along with it. There were like 3 or 4 significant one-shots.
Oh, yeah, there's going to be extra stuff.
Right.
But it's not going to be Crisis on Infinite Earth.
No. I
it's
agree.
not. That's what I'm saying when it's not going to be the big event. That's the mindset. I think they're going to focus it within the Superman titles, within the Bat titles, within the Green titles, within the Magic titles. They're going to focus their big events within that. I think that's where they're going to do, for a little bit again, after Forever Evil.
It all depends on how well Forever Evil sells. Because my belief is if this is a big seller for them and continues that way all the way through, and if some of the titles launched out of it wind up being big sellers, I think sooner rather than later we're going to see another one. Now, when I say sooner rather than later we're going to see another one, year and a half, maybe, is what I'm thinking timeline-wise. I don't think we're going to see one in 6 months, but look what they're already talking about. They're launching some weeklies that are coming up soon. They got a 5 year later event coming, it's going to be a weekly event. It's called 5 years later. So, I mean, what we're already hearing about on the horizon is more events. I don't have a problem with events. I think we as fans have put a negative on that. I think there's a difference between wanting to make a reasonable budget and just understanding, like, maybe you can't get every single event. Maybe you can't be a part of all that. Pick and choose the ones that you're interested in and grab those. But to me, I think, like, you mentioned the Superman titles and all that stuff, and I agree with you. I think that stuff is going to continue to have events, and they should. I want to feel like reading the Superman books is an event. I want to feel like reading Animal Man's an event. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? I think events aren't necessarily such a bad thing. I don't think they should be restricted to the big universe events. I think the individual titles should have them. So that guy who's saying, I can only pick up Animal Man, let's go off of that one, okay, just as an example. They should feel like that title feels like an event all the time, because there's big story arcs that are doing that. Somebody who maybe is a casual DC reader that wants to read a Forever Evil and maybe one other title should be able to do that and, really get a complete story. And I think events are being crafted more that way now, where I think we're going to continue to see the same amount of events being published by publishers, but I think you're going to see more opportunities for people to be a part of whole universe events where they don't have to necessarily read 87 titles to do it. But on the other hand, there's something there for those of us that do. So I don't know. I don't see the events going away, and I don't think events are a bad thing. Because, I don't know, when I'm reading Forever Evil, last thing I'm thinking to myself is, oh, geez, I don't want another one of these anytime soon. I'm like, no, like more of this kind of storytelling, because I'm digging this. I'm far from evented out. I'm evented out when you have to read 500 titles to do it. I'd prefer the titles echo the event in ways that make sense for the creators.
Yes.
And I don't think there's anything else. Damages he talked about, and I have not watched that, but I've heard good things. So
yeah, I've never watched it, and I don't know. I always have just an initial adversity to any like lawyer and legal type of TV shows. For some, I just sometimes when I watch them, I'm like, I'll see stuff that are just that it's needed for a TV show and it's needed for for a TV drama, but in the real world, in the legal world, it would never happen that way. And I'm like, So I've always been very leery whenever it's a law type show.
Jim, I want to shout out Jack real quick. He did a second phone call, but the second phone call that Jack did was it cut off halfway through. So Jack, if you remember what you said in your second phone call, please call back. I'd love to get it on the show. Jack's phone collection is normally really clear, as you heard in the first voicemail of his, but the second one, it started breaking up partway through, which is unusual. So, Jack, please feel free to call in with that phone call again, and I will be happy to throw your comments on the air. So I didn't want you to think that we were ignoring you or not putting that on the show. That happens very rarely. We've had a couple in the times of the show where that's happened, and we certainly want you to part of the show.
Like a human helicopter, the Flash rotates his body, rising faster, faster!
Jim, we are sponsored by DCBService.com and InStockTrades.com. Over at DCBService.com, this is the time of the month that I get really excited for, because when they're getting ready to shift the books, that's when we get to see the amazing deals. Especially in December for me, DCB Service is my best friend because I want to still get my comics, but with holiday shopping and all that, I'm on a really tight budget. So being able to save money on my pre-orders is a huge deal for me. And DCBService.com, 35, 40, 50 to 75% off a lot of times. Amazing material from DCBService.com. Shipping is always a wonderful price point, and my books come immaculate. I've been dealing with them for years. Jim, I would be hard-pressed to remember a time I had to contact them about anything ever being damaged or missing. Maybe once in, 5 years, maybe, for one item, and they've always been Johnny on the spot with sending me back out new material. So I just want to shout out DCBService.com, the wonderful professionalism there. I think that they package everything immaculately. I always get my stuff bagged and boarded by them. So my books come mint, and I just have had a wonderful experience with them. InStockTrades.com, they are doing a Black Friday sale where you can get DC, Marvel, Image, and Dark Horse at 46% off. IDW, Valiant, and Fantastic Graphics, along with Boom Studios, are 38% off. It's a great opportunity to get collected editions at a wonderful price point. $50 or more gives you free shipping. I want to thank DCB Service and InStockTrades.com for supporting our show. Want to remind everyone about our show voicemail line. It's 1-440-388-4434 or Dr. Norge on Skype. And we love having you a part of our show, so please make sure to call into the voicemail line. Shout out RagingBullets.com, which is your place to find out news on what new episodes are coming out from Raging Bullets, including updates on editing, release information for the show. It's tied in with our Twitter account. Every time I post to the website, it goes to Twitter. So if you're a Twitter fan, please go ahead and connect to our website through there. Our show sponsors are always connected on there, show notes from episodes, and you can actually listen to the episodes right on our website as well. We also have a Facebook page, an amazing Facebook group, which is separate from the Facebook page, which is filled with people from all kinds of podcasts, blogs, fans of the show, and fans of comics in general. There's people who participate in our Facebook group who maybe don't listen to the podcast, but love to just talk comics and pop culture. And I love that the group's grown beyond that. I mean, that to me is... That's a sign of the quality of the people that are posting in there, that it's gone beyond our podcast, and I love that. So thank you for all the amazing people that continue to post in that group and have taken it so far beyond our podcast. That's really on them, and I love that it's a community of just awesome people. I'm just proud to be a part of it. So it's good stuff. We have a Google Plus page as well, one for the show, and I have a personal one. So there's lots of different ways to get in contact with us and what we're doing with the podcast. So thank you for joining us in the social networking community. Our next episode, Jim, we are going to kick off with a voicemail from Jason from the podcast that goes Snick. He had some questions about Superman number 25, the end of that Hel-El Krypton Returns story arc, and also Aquaman, the last issue from Jeff Johns. And when you and I listened to that one, it was kind of spoilery, and we really felt that the content in there would be better served if we talked about both books. So we're going to kick off with his voicemail and actually go into both of those books, along with some other content. So it's not just going to be limited to those two books, but those are going to be lead-off features. So we'll keep you posted during the week with what other content we're going to have as well. We will see you then.
Bye.
Flying through space and time, 1,000 different lifetimes. Fated for love and flaws and incredibly clear sightlines. Swinging your mace around, such a practical outlook. Helping the JSA and occasionally supporting your own book. Hawkman, eagle eyes can't see. Hawkman, your plan and what you do to me. Hawkman. The villains are closing in, be they Thanon Guard or Egyptian. Working so hard to thwart you and Hawkgirl's mission. The odds are not on your side, and danger seems to stack up.